Hello and welcome back to our coverage of Gold Club World Cup. I'm Language Hagger and I'm here with my fellow America's Grandmaster Gallon for his first appearance in this tournament's coverage. How are you doing, Gallon?
I am excited, man. This tournament is going to be so much fun. We've got a week of Hearthstone. We're 3 days in, and we're just getting to the meat of the Hearthstone tournament. First day of elimination matches. Right now, we have coming up Barcelona versus Team Liquid. One of their runs ends here.
Yep, and being the two international teams in Group A, it means that one of the international teams are going to be knocked out today, which means that at most one of them can proceed from Group A to the semifinals if they manage to fight their way through the lower bracket. This is obviously a little bit of a different story from Group B, where we have T1, I think, in the... actually, is it T1? I should check that.
It is T1.
I think it was T1. Yeah, so T1 is in the upper brackets there, so they do have a better shot at getting through. But like you said, one of these teams will be eliminated today, and then we will see which of those will be up against Team RNG in the decider match later on.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's kind of the story of this entire tournament so far, is that the Chinese region is overperforming, I would say. You know, for a while there, China was considered probably one of the weakest regions in the world. And I think in the last year and a half, they just continue to dominate. We see that from Lion's amazing performance at the global finals, where she ended up winning, to a bunch of impressive results through Masters Tours throughout the year. You can't really discredit France because obviously they are like the best region so far with multiple winners at every single Masters Tour. But China is like one of those up and coming Masters regions. And I think here they just continue to show how good they are.
Yeah, definitely, especially with IG's performance over the past 3 days. Mainly XC as well, going 6-0 on his priest. It's an incredible feat to have a sweep in last year's standing, but also having two with the same class over the course of a few days is actually just incredible. Now it was a long and grueling match, but he was able to navigate his way through all of the classes that were thrown his way from Team RNG. Now for our match coming up next, do you have any favorites based on the deck list we've been looking at?
So the ban strategy for Barcelona, who's one of the up-and-coming teams in this next match, has been a little bit wonky, I would say, throughout this week. Starting off, they decided to not ban Highlander Hunter versus Royal Never Give Up, and I think that cost them the entire series. They got absolutely rolled by Highlander Hunter. In my opinion, is the best or one of the best decks of the format right now. When you have 4 bans, not banning one of the best decks seems like a bad strategy.
Has been using Horde Pillager, which we haven't seen too much outside of only Bomb Warrior, another class that definitely can use the repetitiveness of getting multiple swings in with weapons. But Horde Pillager paired with something like Warglaves of Azeroth can give you an extra 12 damage if your opponent isn't running weapon removal, which can really add up over the course of the game. Have you seen too much of the Control Demon Hunter versus Priest matchup? Do you kind of know how it goes one way or the other?
Honestly, I think it's one of the ones where I have not that much experience on. Control Demon Hunter is just not my preferred play style of Demon Hunter. I still think it's a great deck. I enjoy watching it. It just, if I was going to play Demon Hunter, I'm going to play aggro every single time. That's just like tempo good. You know, you got to play the aggressive strategies when they're offered to you. And then Galakron Priest is just not really my favorite deck. Even at the last Masters Tour, I decided I hate Priest. I'm not bringing it. Can I have a strategy that bans Priest so I don't have to play it in any of my matches? So it's just those two specific decks against each other, I do not have much experience on. But we were talking about this before the break, and it seems like Control Demon Hunter in the matchup is heavily favored. Even with the Warglaves of Azeroth nerf, which like almost destroyed the card in the aggressive version, didn't really affect it nearly as much in the control version of Demon Hunter. And I think that card is going to be a house in the matchup. It seems like we were talking about it. We're expecting 70-30, if not more, for the Control Demon Hunter side in this matchup.
Yeah, definitely. Like you were saying, Warglaze of Aznath did almost get completely broken out in the Tempo Demon Hunter version, but in Control Demon Hunter, with the amount of anti-aggressive tools that they have to kind of control the board until they can equip the now 6-mana Warglaves, they can pretty safely get to that point, and over the course of the game, hitting their opponent's face over and over again with weapons, maybe with some extra discovered spells from Volpera Scoundrel, a Metamorphosis, maybe a Mechtherodon swing even getting in there, can definitely add up to 30 damage pretty easily over the course of a game.
Yeah, absolutely. The
Um,
repetitive damage of the weapons is going to be probably the key deciding factor in the matchup. And along with that, I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup for another couple reasons. One of them being is that we're going to see Dead Draw in action. And Dead Draw is a name that is just very recently been established in the Hearthstone scene, but he's established it firmly. Multiple top eights throughout the entire year. Still hasn't made Grandmasters, but I think at this rate, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And I just am so happy for him that he got signed to a prestigious organization like Team Liquid, and I'm excited to see him here.
Yeah, definitely. I think we've seen him play a variety of decks as well. We've seen him on control, combo. We've seen him play more aggressive archetypes. So he clearly has a very good grasp of the core game mechanics and strategies that are available. And I'm very curious to see him pilot actually control Demon Hunter. I think it's one of the things he's been playing recently on stream, likely to practice for this event. And I want to kind of see how this matchup against Priest fares. Like you said, we are expecting a bit of a control Demon Hunter favorite. Especially with the priest not running acidic swamp ooze. But there are ways that the priest can combat in this matchup with being able to stick perhaps a big minion with an apotheosis to get outside of the burst damage range from the demon hunter. This isn't quite like the OTK demon hunter we've seen earlier, where an incredible amount of damage can come out in one turn. With the change to Twin Slice, there is still large amounts of damage, but it's not quite an OTK. It will take a few turns set up, so the priest can kind of prepare and try to mitigate some of the damage or offset it with something like Renew or an Apotheosis.
Yep. And Barcelona has access to a couple more tools that we didn't mention. Something like Thought Steal and Thought Stealing the opponent's Moarg Artificer plus I-Beam is just a way to buy yourself, multiple more turns in the game. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how they decide to mulligan in that matchup. And yeah, overall, it's just going to be a really interesting one to watch. I actually don't have a lot of experience, so I think I actually will be able to learn from this upcoming match.
Yeah, me as well. I took a little bit of a break from Constructed in between the Grandmaster seasons, although I did try to get some preparation in for the most recent Master Tour. And for that, I did practice some Control Demon Hunter, and one of the main pulls for me was that it ended up being favored against Priest, at least from what I've seen in practice. So curious to see if this is going to follow that pattern, or if we're going to have what I would consider a bit of an upset with Priest taking the win over the Control Demon Hunter.
For sure. Right now, we're taking a look at the strength showdowns of different players, and I think that Xblize lacks a bit of experience so far on the world stage, but he makes up for it in droves with his deck building and lineup preparation. I think that right now, if you had to give me the best player in the world at making lineups for tournaments, it's easily Xblize. Like, back-to-back Master Sword champion, and both times I think he brought one of, if not the best lineup to the tournament.
All right, we're hopping into the game now. I believe the stats shown there were for Tempo Demon Hunter, not for Control Demon Hunter. It is a relatively newish deck compared to Demon Hunter, so there may be fewer statistics available on that.
Yep. It should be pretty interesting to see how Dead Draw mulligans here. Warglaves is definitely an important part of this matchup, but I think maybe going for the early cycle is more important. I wouldn't be surprised to see him full toss here.
Yep. An interesting thing to note in this matchup is that Moargs, however useful they may be to help the Demon Hunter clear the board, against Priest, who is running penances, doubling the healing gained by the Priest from penance is definitely something that you don't want late game. So we'll occasionally see players kill off their own Moargs late game if they are trying to clear the board. Or some players have also tried tempoing them out early on too to get some chip damage in and hoping to get them removed a bit faster before they can be used by the Priest as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Specifically, just playing it on 2 as a tempo minion. But that's not the strategy Dead Draw is going for, instead opting to try to find the cycle cards, and he actually hits them. Chaos Strike plus Spectral Sight are both really good early game cycle cards.
Yep, for sure. Going first, Dead Draw has access to one fewer card than his opponent. And without having any cycle cards in hand, that's one of the ways that the deck can just run out of gas. There are a lot of cycle cards, double Spectral Sight, double Skull of Gul'dan, double Chaos Strike, and you still have 2 Volpera Scoundrels that can help you discover even more card draw. But if you whiff on all 8 of these cards, you can't quickly run out of just gas, being able to remove the board, or even pressure your opponent with your own threats.
And just an important thing to note, we can talk about this for a bit, is that because Team Liquid is playing the controlled Demon Hunter, they actually avoid a really common trap against Priest. Recently, over the past couple weeks, Priest has been innovated a lot in terms of deck lists. And we saw, I think it started with No Hands Gamer when he won WSOE, where he was running Imprisoned Fiend and Grave Runes and multiple things that just fought for board really aggressively in the early game. And specifically were very powerful cards against aggressive Demon Hunters. And right now, we see that XPlies has an Imprisoned Fiend on turn 2. I was talking with some expert Priest players in this matchup, and they said when they have Imprisoned Fiend on turn 2, they have like an 80-20 in the matchup. It's that powerful. But since Team Liquid is playing Control Demon Hunter, they just kind of avoid that entire trap.
Yeah, definitely. Now, XPlies and FC Barcelona have brought Imprisoned Fiend as a nod to some of the more aggressive decks. Without the use of Grave Runes and the 5-mana split Psyche, I believe it's called, to kind of duplicate the board and make it more durable, it is a lot easier for Demon Hunter to deal with these individual minions. I found that in practice against this cube Priest, we'll call it, it is actually much harder for Demon Hunter to be able to fully clear boards like that. So it's easier for the Priest to stick a big Mana Saber, for example, with an Apotheosis. But these cards, like Mana Saber and Grave Rune, are not available for FC Barcelona. So we'll see how they'll be able to use what tools they have to try and threaten the Demon Hunter.
For sure. And already, I feel like I've learned something in this matchup. 2 turns in a row, XPlies has decided to, instead of playing his cards like Thoughtsteal, trying to, get through his turns that he needs to get through, like at some point he's going to need to cast Thoughtsteal. Instead, he's just opted to heal his face twice in a row. So already it seems like the winning line for Priest is going to be keeping their hero alive as much as possible, forgoing tempo options just to remove face damage.
Yep, limiting the amount of damage that can come in is definitely very important. I said earlier that a lot of damage can eventually come out in one turn with a weapon equipped, with some Twin Slices coming out after Metamorphosis is used. So making sure the Priest is as healthy as possible so that over time they can continue using their hero power, Renew, once that chip damage is coming in, to make sure that they don't fall low enough to die to a big damage combo.
Definitely.
Do you think this is going to be a draw turn for Dead Draw, or do you think it's going to value
it's
trying
an
to remove this?
outcasted skull. Right?
It'll still be outcasted next turn.
That is true, but you have 6 mana, it's turn 6, and the skull's on the far left. This makes fair. A lot of sense to me.
That's fair.
Interesting
discounted
line
cards
here. Dead Draw could decide to, he could make that cost 0 if he wanted to by attacking with the Blood Mage Thalnos first.
Yep, it does let him clear up the Shield of Galakron this turn if he so chooses.
I think he might be interested in holding the I-Beam and just use, Immolation Aura here. I think this makes a lot of sense.
Yep, I like this a lot as well. I-Beam dealing 3 right now. It could end up dealing 6 later, perhaps even 12 if both Morgs are played. Immolation Aura is a bit harder to use in this matchup as well because Priest doesn't generally go that wide, so using it to deal 2 damage there as a single target when the card is normally used for AoE, I think is a good nod to this matchup.
What do you normally look for with Zephrys in this matchup?
Well, when you get late enough in the game for Zephrys to be active, you're going to be in a couple of different spots. You're either going to be trying to get the final amounts of damage in against the priests, so you want to maybe find some burn with it, or the priest happened to invoke Galakron enough times to get some threatening minions that you haven't been able to deal with, and you still have damage left over. Maybe you have some Twin Slices, a meta left, some Volpera Scoundrels. So I generally find that you use it to find some extra burst damage. You can maybe step up Pyroblast with it as well, that the priest can't really prepare itself for, or you use it to kind of take a big board swing and take control of the board, or prevent the priest from sneaking minions that can be Apotheosis.
Right, so pretty much late game, optimally you want to be using it as burn, but sometimes you have to go for the removal strategy with Zeph.
Yep, based on how the game plays out. What gets really crazy is when you end up having multiple metamorphoses off of the player's Scoundrel plus your natural one lets you get a lot of extra burst damage, even with the nerf to Metamorphosis, where each hero power only does 4 damage down from 5. 8 damage for 7 mana is still pretty hefty when you compare it to something like Pyroblast for 10 or Fireball for 6.
Yeah, and I mean, just because you have the same hero power the entire time, if you cast a Metamorphosis with a Metamorphosis hero power used, you actually still refresh your hero power. So you could just like ping someone for 4, play another Metamorphosis, ping them for 4 again, and have this surprise burst out of nowhere.
Yeah, definitely. And this is one of the matchups where holding some of the cards you get that are discovered from Volpera can actually lead to quite a bit of surprise damage. I've seen at least players also pick something like Inner Demon from Volpera. It is a matchup that tends to be a bit slower, so if the Priest is having trouble developing threats, you can just spend 8 mana and hit him in the head for 8, and something that the Priest can't really account for because it's something discovered off of Volpera Scoundrel.
That sounds pretty good.
8 mana, 8 damage, seems fine.
Small thing to note here, Dedra has a pretty awkward hand, I would say, where his Skull, if he wants to get it outcast from the left, he's going to have to play Zephyrus and Chaos Nova. So is there ever a world where you'd consider like casting Skull of Gul'dan without it being outcasted?
100%. Getting the discounts from Skull of Gul'dan is very important, but something you'll run into this matchup is when you do have something like Zephyrus on the far left, because on average, you will be drawing Zephyrus before both Skull of Gul'dans, or maybe half the time or so. And with that being the case, you don't want to dump Zephyrus, which is one of the most important cards left over as a finisher. You'd rather just play the Skull of Gul'dan and cycle. Mana doesn't tend to be an issue too much into the late game. You do have ways to clear boards pretty efficiently with something like Blade Dance. So the fact that they're not discounted by 3 mana or 2 mana for some other cards isn't really a bit of an issue. I like just being able to spend your mana and draw the cards.
For sure. So far, it seems like both sides have played this pretty darn close to optimally. I really like X-Blize's strategy to just heal his face, and I also like Dedraw's cycle-heavy strategy. So, I think there's been a couple hard turns so far, and I think they've been nailed. The non-outcasted Skull of Gul'dan was probably the hardest, and I really like that Dedra opted to just draw 3 there.
Yeah, it's something that tends to be a bit unintuitive because you want to be getting the outcast generally, but this is a matchup where once you play it enough, you'll realize that it's much more important to just make sure you get all the resources in your deck instead of trying to optimize the outcasts. I think it has been a bit of a tough game so far for both players. Like you've said, Blaze hasn't had too much development past the Mind Flayer Carge and the invokes he had here with the Sandhoof Waterbearer, so he has to figure out how to kind of make sure Dedra can't get ahead and push some extra damage.
Dedra is still opting to go for Cycle, taking Chaos Strike over Twin Slice, even though Twin Slice would deal 2 more damage. I'm guessing that means that the activated Zephyrus is going to be very crucial to winning this game.
Definitely. As you can see already from the player deck counts on the right, Dedra already has only 7 cards left, whereas Blaze still has 17 after this draw. So another big part of this deck being favored against Priest is that if you draw and play 30 cards before your opponent can draw and play their 30 cards, you tend to be a bit favored. And we've seen stuff like that in Miracle Rogue in the past, where it's not that, they can go card for card with opposing decks, but if they can draw and play everything very, very quickly, it's difficult for a lot of decks to keep up with that.
So did X-Blize just get rid of the coin to make space in his hand?
I believe so. It looks like he's trying not to use Renew as well and wanting to maximize the heal off of it, or saving it to, I guess, use it for a more specific situation that he doesn't know will arise just yet, depending on what maybe Zephyrus comes out with, or perhaps what Volpera can develop. Because Volpera still can get some tempo options like Command the Illidari, which I believe is a 5-mana summon 6/1/1s, which Blaze has an answer for, but maybe he can find something like a Holy Ripple that can also heal him on top of removing that he might choose to take.
I think this is going to be the first turn where I actually have a question about, because I'm going to take a look real quick at Barcelona's deck list. It seems like he might be going for another Penance, and he doesn't want to discard the Penance. That makes some sense. I just generally don't like discarding coins, even when I'm about to overdraw, because I always feel like having the option to play different cards matters more than just the extra value from drawing a specific card. However, considering that Penance is in the deck, that's probably a card worth trying to get in hand.
Yeah. As I said earlier, there's a few ways Priest can kind of mitigate the damage and make sure, or try to prevent the Demon Hunter from doing a full 30 over the course of a few turns, and that's by healing. And obviously using your hero power is one way to do that, but you won't always have that option if you're also trying to deal with the board at the same time, or maybe try to plan out how much damage they're doing in the next turn or two based on how many Twin Slices they have left, or if Metamorphosis is up. And because of that, having cards like Penance are actually very important. 3 health might not seem like a lot, but it could literally be the make or break in this matchup.
For sure. And even here, like, XBlize could debate whether to cast this Renew. It might be a situation where the Apotheosis would actually heal for 8 or 9, and casting a Renew now would actually mean you overheal with the Apotheosis later. And since it's only 1 mana, it does make some sense to hold it back. You also kind of want to see what is going to happen with the board state before determining your spell. So even though he could gain the full 3 health here, I think XBlize holding off on this Renew was a very smart decision.
Yeah, I like this a lot as well. As we stated earlier, this is going to be a full 30 damage OTK. I'd be very surprised if that actually happened. I'm not even sure if you can do it. You might need to generate a couple of extra Twin Slices, which you can from cards like Cobalt Spellkin, but most of the time it's damage chunks of like 10, 12, maybe based on how much damage is coming out. So even though he's not at 30 here, I think it's fine to hold the Renew, like you were saying, for a future turn perhaps, and maybe get use out of something like Apotheosis.
For sure. And if he is going to do the 30 damage combo, the Metamorphosis needs to come down. So that's not going to happen for at least a couple more turns, like you were saying.
I'm actually trying to think now if you can actually do 30 damage in 1 turn. Maybe with some discounted cards off of Skull.
I don't think so. I think you need a Kael'thas and a couple 8 damage cards for 0 mana with Inner Demon. So none of those really exist right now, and I don't really see how Dedra is going to generate a Kael'thas with no card generation cards left in deck. But you know, wackier stuff has happened in Hearthstone.
With 4 copies of Twin Slays, perhaps you can do 16. Maybe with a pre-existing weapon. If one's discounted with a Metamorphosis, you get up to 20-something, but it's not quite 30.
Oh, that is good.
That is good. And this is something Dedra might have to account for in terms of saving Blade Dance to deal with something like a Reliquary Prime, because hitting into the Prime would heal Blythe back up. Obviously, that's a few turns out of the way now, but it's something that does need to be considered.
Do you think Dedra is just going to load up these Twin Slices? Spending your mana seems pretty good here, but you might want to hold 1 back just to be able to Blade Dance in the future.
Perhaps, yeah. He's looking at McTheridan Chaos Nova if he wants to completely wipe out a board, but past that removal, he might need a bit more oomph, and I think that's what he's considering now if he wants to hold on to this for the chance to use Blade Dance a bit later.
If he uses the Twin Slice now, I think there actually is a breakpoint that he gets to. Okay, so if he Twin Slices now, he deals 10. The Priest goes down to 12, correct? Next turn, they heal up back to 14. Dedra uses the Metamorphosis and the Twin Slice. That deals 6 damage for 2 mana. They're at 8. You now have Zephyrus and 6 mana remaining for the
Avenging Wrath?
Avenging Wrath for exact lethal. So I think there might have been there actually is an argument for using that last copy of Twin Slice here.
Gotcha. Perhaps that's the case. I don't recall what the last 3 cards in Dedra's deck are. The game's been going by pretty quickly. But if he does have more burst left, he might be trying to do it over the course of a few extra turns, having already seen both Renews now. Maybe he wants to just hold on to this, like you said, in case a Blade Dance needs to come out against perhaps a big taunted Apotheosis minion.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a very soft lethal setup. Like, there's a lot that XBlize could do to stop that from killing him.
Yeah,
you know, it's not just as simple as he only has 2 health hero power.
So Dedra has to figure out over the course of a few turns how he can try to get all this damage through to face. He does have Metamorphosis. The Priest has given up
all this damage. What are you talking about? He's got 8 remaining with the Twin Slice and the hero power. He's got probably 10 more from the Zephyrus and a couple 1 damage pings. Does he really have that much damage
13
left?
damage. I count 13 damage this turn.
This turn, sure, but like 19 over the course of a couple. But is that really enough?
Again, it comes down to how Blythe is going to be able to set up around this. He's played Galakron for the extra armor now, potentially trying to stop a kill turn he's expecting from Dedra. We saw him use the Mana Burn as well. I'm wondering if this came out a little bit too early or if he needed the armor immediately to prevent lethal.
If Dedra had used the second copy of Twin Slice and XBlize didn't have a Mana Burn, then the Galakron would save him. But beyond that, I'm not really sure.
I think both of them together. I believe there's a Horde Pillager left in Dedraw's deck, if I'm not
Okay,
mistaken.
that changes things.
They're
Horde
running one
Pillager could
copy.
be an extra 12 damage, or yeah, 12 damage over the course of several turns.
Yes, it could also give Eldraki Warblades, which isn't that much. It's 4.
Yeah, and I
So
believe that there are 3 copies of Eldraki and 2 of the Warglaze in the pool right now.
Are there?
Because the first Horde Pillager ended up equipping the Eldraki.
There's only one Horde Pillager.
Oh, there's only... Yes, I know.
Has one been played already?
One Horde Pillager has been played already.
Oh, then no, there's definitely no Horde Pillagers left. There's only one Pillager.
Oh, okay.
So if one's been... Yeah, sorry.
Right.
Miscommunication.
Okay, so I'm not sure at all how Dead Draw is going to be able to do this. And based off of the way X-Blaze was playing, I think I kind of want to revisit that stance that I had that Control Demon Hunter was favored, because it seems like X-Blaze really knew what to do in this matchup. Like, the healing every single turn to deny as much damage as possible from Dead Draw's perspective, saving the renews for when it was exactly needed. Even off of the renews, he took the most marginal of healing spells to like stave off death in the form of Holy Ripple and Holy Nova. And I think X-Blaze like piloted this pretty perfectly.
Yep, it looks like he has. He's completely out of any damage combo that we can see in Dedraw's hand right now. It's just not adding up to be enough. Maybe over time with some chip damage from the hero powers, but I think Dead Draw might be dying to fatigue or pressure before that's going to be the case.
That is not going to do it. Last card is Chaos Strike.
2, 4, 6, 7 damage with hero power plus double twin slice Chaos Strike this turn. Yeah, that's
not even close.
Quite far. Yeah, that's not even close.
There was one turn where Dead Draw had a really soft lethal setup, but beyond that, like, he just never got even close to getting there.
There is not that much damage, healing left from Blaze's side. He does have a generated Holy Nova here. If Dead Draw can clear this board, is there ever a chance he does stall the game long enough to get a bit of chip damage in with the hero powers that he can set up something like a Zeph Pyroblast over 2?
So you need to have Zephyrus. You're probably not going for a Pyroblast anymore. You might be going for a... he didn't get the Doomhammer. He was looking for a Doomhammer here and was hoping that would work. But I'm not even sure if that would be lethal.
It wouldn't be this turn, but hoping that Blaze doesn't have any damage and then going forward from there might give him a chance.
I think that Blaze just kills him the following turn. I might be wrong. I would need to see what the board state looks like. There's 10 in play. He takes 3. And then there's another 2 from the...
Chaos Strike in hand.
So he would be at 1? Is that right?
Morg Eye Beam to heal back up, maybe?
But then Holy Nova also like staves off the damage, I believe. So I think even with the Doomhammer offered at the very end, I don't think Dead Draw got there. So, but with the Doomhammer, there's actually a lot more burst potential than I was thinking, because that represents, not just 60 damage from the Doomhammer, but the extra 1 from the hero power, twin slice, etc. It actually ends up being a lot.
It doubles a lot of damage.
So maybe he was just looking for Doomhammer in the late game, and I think that makes a lot of sense. But
Doomhammer, from the testing I've seen, is offered in very, very specific scenarios. The board generally has to be clear or it won't be offered it to you. So I'm wondering if maybe there was a turn where Dead Draw could have cleared the board, loaded up a bit of damage on his hero, then played Zephyrs to try and get a Doomhammer earlier than this final turn. Because on that final turn, I don't think it's ever going to offer you Doomhammer.
Yeah, I mean, that was like kind of a talking point for a while before Ashes of Outland, the set dropped, where people were like, with Inner Demon, we're just going to go Zephyrus Doomhammer and win every single game easily. And then people realize, hey, Zephyrus really doesn't like Doomhammer that much. So didn't like it there either. But yeah, X-Blaze, I think he played that game optimally. I really don't see anything he did wrong. He tried to maximize life gain, which I think is the critical part of that matchup. And he did it successfully every single turn, even when it was like a little bit complicated. So I really like how that matchup played out. I feel a little bit bad for Dead Draw that the Doomhammer wasn't offered at the end, but X-Blaze is a really tough opponent. So what can you do against that?
Yeah, definitely. I think you piloted it very well. And like you said, this isn't a very intuitive matchup. There's a lot of thinking about what potential bursts your opponent's going to have. And sometimes you do have to factor in stuff from Volpara's Scoundrel and think about how much you can really play around. But the main thing, I think, like you said, playing it very, very precisely, making sure you get all the heals in that you can, maximizing it, not using renews needlessly unless you do think that there's a damage combo coming in. And we saw that on the few turns that he held renew, even though he wasn't at full life. I think it was played very well, like you're saying.
Yeah. And looking forward to the matchups that we have, the remaining decks for Team Liquid, and you have to remember that this is last hero standing, not conquest. So when a deck is eliminated, that means it's out. Normally in conquest, when you win with a deck, you don't play with it anymore. But in LHS, when you win with the deck, you stay on it. In this case, Team Liquid's decks that remain are going to be Highlander Mage, Evolve Shaman, that was inspired by John Bray, Dragon Spell Druid, Secret Rogue, and Murloc Paladin. So against the Priest that they just faced, I expect probably Shaman to maybe come out, maybe Rogue as well, but something that really can deal with Priest's like medium tempo game plan.
How do you feel about the Druid versus Priest matchup? We talked about this a little bit with the other casters, but I don't think we've had your take on it yet. Do you think Druid's a bit favored there, or do you think Priest is?
I think Druid is pretty favored, especially considering that Priest has sacrificed quite a bit to get that anti-aggro game plan with the Imprisoned Vile Fiend. And here, let me take just another quick look to make sure that they don't have Grave Rooms in their list. But overall, I think that the Druid's game plan just lines up very nicely against what Priest's power turns and weak turns are. If Druid can overgrowth into an exotic Mount Solar turn and Priest just is on 6 mana instead of 7, the game kind of ends. So I think a lot of Druid hands beat a lot of Priest hands.
That's fair. I think I would agree in that sense as well. There are some cards that can help a little bit from these lists that we're seeing. There are Shadow Menaces in Team Liquid's Priest, which isn't super useful early game, but it can help deal with some of the Mount Cellar turns. If something like an Emperor Cobra pops out of the Mount Cellar with the spells popping out, that can easily just clear the threat as well. But of course, it is something that can be played around if something like Ironbark is used on one of the other beasts. And we've also seen a little bit, not in this tournament, but in the past, with cards like Thoughtsteel, the Priest managed to find some overgrowth themselves and managed to ramp up as well to help deal with the Druids. That being said, that's not par for the course. That can, it can just kind of happen in some games. It's not super likely though.
Yeah, when Priest outramps you as Druid, that feels pretty that feels pretty bad. I think that might actually happen in this matchup. One thing to note is that Team Liquid is not running any Thoughtsteals in their deck, but Barcelona is. So Barcelona could theoretically Thoughtsteal the Overgrowth in that matchup if Team Liquid decides to go for the Druid. I don't know if they really will, though. I think that there might be a slightly stronger queue than specifically Druid, but we still have to wait and see. We're still waiting on the pick and ban phase from the players, but as soon as we get that info, we will tell you guys. And beyond that, let's just talk about some random factoids about this tournament. First off, we said that China was overperforming, but the team that has been, I think, performing the worst so far is probably Barcelona. Last in the Battlegrounds, their first match in Constructed was a loss, and I think they got pretty rolled in that loss, specifically because of their poor pick and ban phase, leaving up Highlander Hunter. And like even me, I'm not an expert at Battlegrounds. I'm 7K MMR. I'm a total noob compared to a lot of these guys. Even I was catching like a couple mistakes that they were making in the Battlegrounds tournament. So, I think that in a lot of regards, they were prepared for this tournament. Like we just saw XBlize play some fantastic priest gameplay. And, I really do think that they practiced that matchup quite a bit. But in other areas, it seems like they're really struggling. And maybe there was a lack of preparation for the Battlegrounds specifically.
It's possible. I know G has mentioned that she heard that Barcelona has more recently started, at least the players that are present for this tournament had more recently been getting into Battlegrounds, maybe as, practice for this tournament specifically. So they might have a lot less experience as the other players, even though they do have the powerful minds that we've seen performing in Grandmasters and over the Master Tours tournament. It might just take them a bit of time to get the ball rolling a little bit. And we saw that a bit today. In the first lobby, it was still kind of rough for them, but by the second lobby, they had a much better placement. They had Zim in second place, and I believe Blyze as well finished fourth place. So if they can continue to kind of follow that sort of game plan over the next two lobbies remaining for them, at least in Battlegrounds, hopefully that can help pull them up a little bit in the standings. And today as well, the 1-0 start against a matchup that in practice I think we've said has been a bit favored, but piloted excellently by Blyze, can perhaps get them through this lower bracket and get them to the semifinals if they can also take the decider game against Team RNG.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any player in the tournament to root for, it is Blyze. He's a very solid player, and I mean, if he just keeps it up, I think Barcelona has a really decent shot at making it through this bracket and potentially winning this whole thing. That being said, he's playing against Bunny Hopper, who we had to do a caster rating of each player from the Western teams for this tournament, and I believe that Bunny Hopper scored the highest for me out of every single player in the region, like of the overall combined stats of talking about macro game plan, deck building, experience, etc. And I think Bunny Hopper came as close as perfect as you possibly can. And he's just a hard opponent, Language Hacker.
Yeah, I mean, you can see that from the averages. It wasn't just your score. He has the almost complete hexagon filled in with his rating across all 6 metrics here. But yeah, Bunny Hopper is just an absolute powerhouse in Hearthstone, not only in Constructed, but we've seen him do some Battlegrounds as well. Not for this tournament, but on his streams, he does switch a little bit to Battlegrounds as well. So it looks like a bunch of skills that he can use in Constructed also kind of carry over to Battlegrounds. Yep. Looks like they're queuing up Secret Rogue against Galacron Priest, so kind of what you were expecting. Would you have preferred this as opposed to something like, what was the second deck that you recommended queuing into this?
Galacron Shaman also has a
Galacron
good
Shaman
matchup versus Priest. So the thing to note about Secret Road specifically is I think it has a slightly worse win rate versus Priest overall. But this is getting into a pretty high level argument for why it's still a better queue. And that's because you've got 5 decks to choose from as Team Liquid, right? And you're only going to be playing with 2 of them remaining for the series. So even though Secret Rogue has a little bit worse of a win rate in this specific matchup, I think overall, Rogue is just a much stronger deck than Shaman. It has a lot less polarizing matchups, and it comes down to a lot of player skill, in my opinion. So if you get Bunny Hopper on Rogue, where there's lots of decisions, very long games, with a deck that is not nearly as polarized as Shaman, and that is one of your 2 decks compared to Galacron Shaman, which has a great win rate versus Priest, but it really struggles against a lot of other classes. I think that sacrificing a little bit of win rate here to get a lot later makes a ton of sense. So I do like the Secret Rogue pick for Team Liquid.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Being down 1 game in this series, like you said, you want to pick something that has less polarizing matchups and where you can actually get some edge on your opponents by playing a good deck and playing it well by making a lot of decisions. Because after this game, if they do manage to beat Priest, guess what? The FC Barcelona is going to try to counter queue whatever they queue with. So if you queue up a deck here, like you said, that has fewer polarizing matchups, has a decent spread across the board, it makes it much harder to get that counter queue in. And you are able to try to come back from this 1 game loss deficit.
Yeah, and I just love watching Bunny Hopper play Rogue. There's a lot of people that play Rogue, and there's very few of them that I enjoy watching. Bunny Hopper is one of them. I think he understands this deck at the highest level. He understands what his role is in every single matchup. He knows how to sequence his turns, when to dagger, when to coin Evil Miscreant, when to go for the Togwaggle wand plays, when to deviate from that against Priest, how to utilize his mana as effectively as possible, and just makes lots of smart decisions every single game, every single turn. So I'm really excited for this matchup.
Yeah, it's always a pleasure to watch Bunny Hopper play. I'm a fan of him playing anything, and actually Rogue is one of my least favorite classes, but I do think that it has a lot of intricacies that a lot of players might not be able to perform as well with the deck as someone as a caliber of Bunny Hopper. And now I have a question for you about this mulligan. Mm-hmm. Okay, we've already seen it now, but do you think Spy Mistress is worth keeping here, or are you looking for some more powerful cards in this matchup, like trying to find your Kronkses, your Galacrons, your Togwaggles?
I think Spy Mistress is totally okay. Before, when you're playing against Resurrect Priest, 1-drops mattered not nearly as much, but that was also an entirely different matchup. Before the Galacron Priest innovation and people playing this more tempo style of Priest, you could really just play control as Rogue. You didn't really have to do anything. You could just play some piddly minions, and that was more than enough to pressure the Priest into dealing with your board instead of developing their own piddly minions. But now, since Priest actually has real threats and Apotheosis to capitalize on them, I mean, we see Imprisoned Vile Fiend in hand, you need to actually fight for board. And that means that you have to sacrifice those late game inevitable strategies like Togwaggle or Galakron, because, if the priest kills you, you die. And you don't really have time to play your cards if you're dead. So you have to avoid dying. And that means that you have to keep your 1-drops and play for tempo.
All right, that makes sense to me. I know it's generally obvious to keep a 1-drop, but I wanted to ask if in this matchup you think it is more value-based or tempo-based, and it sounds like you're saying that it has become a lot more tempo-based and you can't just blindly mulligan for your value cards.
Yes, that I would agree with. I'd still probably keep Heistmer and Togwaggle in this matchup. I think that card is a pretty critical resource against Priest, but I wouldn't be aggressively mulliganing away my tempo game plan to find it.
Okay, makes sense. Do you have a favorite as to what kind of rogue you prefer playing into Priest, secret versus stealth package?
Well, I just have a preferred rogue overall, and it's neither. It's Highlander rogue. I like Highlander rogue, but if I had to choose between stealth and secret rogue, I think that secret is just much better. I'm not a fan of Greyheart Sage. I think that card is terrible. And I know that it isn't terrible, but I still think it is. So, and you can't change my mind on that.
No, that's fine. I personally prefer secret over stealth as well, but I forgot to mention Highlander, which I don't think we've seen most of the teams, if not any of the teams, bring that this tournament. So curious to see that most people have gone towards the secret package and the stealth package. Maybe a nod to something like Dragon Queen Alexstrasza being nerfed as of lately.
Yep. One thing to note, though, is that Highlander rogue actually got less impacted than the normal rogue list due to the Galakron nerf. Normally, when you're playing Highlander Rogue, you're really only drawing 1 or 2 cards off the Galakron, while Secret and Stealth are really trying to hit those 4-card Galakrons. And that means that you're spending 2 less mana whenever you play your Galakron with Highlander Rogue, because you're just drawing 2 less cards. So, there was some downsides with the Dragon Queen Alexstrasza nerf that obviously hurt the deck, but they got way less affected by the Galakron nerf.
Now, we just saw Bunny Hopper punch Blythe in the face here with his dagger. Does that kind of mean he's trying to re-equip next turn?
It's an interesting punch. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I think that it's very ambitious, right? It's a very ambitious dagger face. And I guess from Bunny Hopper's side, there's not many cards that he'd be interested in playing this turn. But I mean, even Evil Miscreant off the top would probably mean that you want to hold back the dagger. So I'm not entirely sure if I agree with the dagger swing, but at the same time, I don't think it's going to be that important either way.
Sure. We've seen cards like Devoted Maniac sort of lose their way in rogue lists lately. We've seen more of Questing Adventurers pop up, Spy Mistress, even in a secret type rogue. It's still worth having these more aggressive minions to help try to fight for the board. Whereas Devoted Maniac, even though it does invoke Galakron faster, it does not that much on board immediately outside of dealing 2 damage as a rush.
The Praise Galakron is a pretty sweet play from Bunny Hopper. It just means that if the Imprisoned Biofiend goes into the 4-2, then he can just dagger it down for free the following turn.
Yep.
Sad news is that the X-Blythe has the anti-aggro cards, and that means that this broken ambusher is going to destroy Bunny Hopper's game plan.
And we're starting to see what you were talking about. Bly's getting on the board with Priest, and these Valfiends showing that they are doing quite a bit of work in some matchups that we may not have expected them to be, or maybe not the reason why they were put in the deck, but they are still showing that they are useful in some matchups that aren't the primary function for them.
Yeah, Shadow Madness is definitely an anti-Demon Hunter card. Like, that's the first and foremost reason that Shadow Madness is in the deck. But like you were saying earlier, it has a lot of applications versus Druid whenever they get a Emperor Cobra. It has applications versus a lot of tempo-based decks. We saw it here. It's insane versus Ambush. So overall, I think that Bunny Hopper is still in a decent enough position because he has his tempo plays like Backstab. But if he didn't have that Backstab, you can see what I mean about, the Rogue would probably just get run over here.
Yeah, definitely. Starting to get a little low on resources, and the Priest being able to push the advantage would have been a real problem, especially if there was no answer to that Sethek Veilweaver.
X-Blythe has a pretty obvious play here. You just hit and heal.
Yep.
Tempo good.
Time Warp also cleanly clears this, but Apotheosis is much harder to use as, let's say, removal, and it also capitalizes on the fact that there's a minion that Bunny Hopper still left up, which he may not have a way to deal with.
All right. How does Bunny Hopper get out of this position? The 5/5 needs to die. That is like step 1 of his game plan. Forget anything about Heistmer and Togwaggle off the top or Galakron. The 5/5 needs to die.
How do we get rid of it?
I'm thinking if you're Lackey first, see if you get an answer. If you don't, then you go Evil Miscreant, try to find a Rush Lackey. And then you evolve your Evil Miscreant, rush the 4-drop into the 5/5, hope that works.
Restless Mummy is a good backup plan, but you'd have to play that before the Evil Miscreant, which makes it a little less likely, and probably not the play you want to look for. Bunny Hopper actually gives up the Eviscerate here, choosing not to take the guaranteed kill on the Vile Fiend in order to get some more card draw and get to some more tools that he needs in his deck.
Yeah, it would have made Draconic Lackey quite a much better Lackey than normal. Being able to just reduce this card's cost to 3 means that, the value game plan for Bunny Hopper might actually work. Oh! Star Scryer is very bad for Bunny Hopper, actually. I think that X-Blast...
It may look good, but yeah.
Yeah. I think X-Blast is just going to capitalize by stealing that and just running away with it.
Do you agree with not taking Eviscerate here and trying to find another line and saying, I'll deal with this Vile Fiend later?
I think so. I think drawing 3 cards is up Bunny Hopper's alley right now. He was really running out of stuff to do, and he needs stuff to do to stay in this matchup. Hoping for a Rush Lackey, I think, made sense to me. And he didn't find it, so it looks really brutal right now, but I don't think that you can always take guaranteed lines when you're in a disadvantaged board state like this. So even though it looked like a little bit low percentage-wise to work out, I think it was still the highest percent that Bunny Hopper had.
Yep. Bunny Hopper recognizing the macro strategy required to come back in this game is not just to clear this minion off the board. He does need some more resources from his deck. So I do like this, especially when he has 27 health to work with. He can take a few hits from this Vile Fiend and still be comfortable.
All right. Ice Baron Togwaggle into the Toland's Goblet, into Galakron. That's an easy win.
You are seeing lines that I don't think Bunny Hopper is going to agree with, but that would be very interesting. Would it actually even be good to hit that many Galakrons?
Probably not. It might be good to hit that many Kronkses, though.
We saw actually in our last round on Team RNG when the Rogue was being played that the Kronks was attempted to be gobleted, but unfortunately was missed. We'll see if that's also going to be what happens this game, but I think Bunny Hopper is going to lean towards either the Crown or the Wand. The Wand notoriously polarizing this matchup because if it goes off and hits some good targets, obviously Bunny Hopper is in a great position as the Rogue, but the risk of playing it is that the Priest can also play Murazond into it and also get a Wand played, discounting the cards in their deck as well.
I'm not going to lie, I think that Murazond should be the last thing on Bunny Hopper's mind. I don't think he's ever beaten that card. That should just be like out of sight, out of mind. I also think Soul Mirror should be out of sight, out of mind right now. I don't think Bunny Hopper is beating either of those cards. He's really far behind, and Zera's Crown does do the best job at trying to regain tempo. Hopefully he finds a huge minion like Colossus of the Moon that can't really be killed by Soul Mirror.
Yep. Colossus of the Moon is probably one of the best cards. Not necessarily in every matchup, but in this matchup, I think specifically, it's very difficult to deal with it. You can't death it, you can't Soul Mirror it to get the clear. You have to use so many resources to be able to get through it. So we'll see if that's what Bunny Hopper had in mind with the Crown. And I think taking the Crown here makes sense as well and kind of reinforces the fact that Candle Breath was a pretty good pickup the turn before instead of the Eviscerate, because now with the Togwaggle pickup, he is able to go for a more tempo-oriented line, knowing that he can still fall back on drawing some cards with a Candle Breath.
Yep. I have to imagine that Bunny Hopper is going to rip the Xerax Crown this turn. I think holding on to that is probably just doomed to fail. So
I think he's considering if he wants to throw in the questing as well.
I think you do, just because you can't really beat Soul Mirror. So you play all of your stuff. Hope it works out.
Oof.
No.
That's a 10-mana minion.
You know, go to the next slide.
Undo. Okay, 5/5s are the best option there. Taking 10 drops here in case an Evolve Lucky pops up. I do believe evolving a 10 drop will
turns it into another 10 drop. Yep, you got it right.
Correct. Blyce has the Soul Mirror, so this board that Bunny Hopper generated falls really quickly, and now he's left trying to redevelop. Now, he is not technically behind on board, and he has initiative, but there were a lot of resources used there to be able to deny the board development that Bly's already had.
Yeah. From Bunny Hopper's perspective, the good news is that he still has lots of things that he can get done. I'd maybe have started with the Pharaoh Cat instead of the Dragon's Breath.
What are you looking for?
I'm just looking for like a big minion. If Bunny Hopper got a Wrapped Golem, I think maybe playing that over drawing 3 makes a lot of sense, just because developing on board states, especially when they're empty, is a really good thing in this matchup.
Sure. Wind Guardian as well. Difficult for Priest to deal with. Can't target with death. Soul Mirror is gone.
Yep. I don't think there are any dragons in the Reborn pool, so there's not really any merit to like playing Pharaoh Cat in the hopes that you can reduce the cost of your Dragon's Breath, but...
Not yet. Maybe we'll see one.
True.
In the upcoming Sholomance expansion.
I believe Reborn is kind of like a set-specific mechanic. It'll probably be a while before we see that again.
Probably. But, you know, we can hope and imagine. Reborn Dragon would be pretty cool. Kind of like a Phoenix egg.
Is that what you want for the holidays? Reborn as a new mechanic?
No, I was just throwing some stuff out there, trying to be funny.
Sure.
Thanks for making sure that I know I'm not.
Is there any reason to playing the... Does he want to... Okay, so he wants the... Okay, so this is actually a really heads-up play for Bunny Hopper. He sequenced the Questing Adventure, so there's going to be a 4/4 rather than a 5/5, so that X-Bize's deaths don't kill it.
Yep. Generally, you want to make questing as big as possible, but in this specific matchup, when you're trying to make tricky boards for the priest to deal with, exactly like you said, making sure that it can't be deathed makes it a lot more difficult for the priest to actually get rid of it. He does play the Kronks last turn to draw Galakrond, realizing that I don't think he can wait to draw the Galakrond and then use the Kronks. He needs to start doing stuff now, because giving the priest enough time will just let the priest accumulate more resources, develop more minions, especially when it's not being under any pressure from Bunny Hopper. So I do like that he played the Kronks here. And he does Shadow Step it, so he can use it later as well.
Yeah, this was a really good set of cards that Bunny Hopper got as well. 1-mana Flick Skyship is great in this matchup. Edwin is just another big threat, and then he also has the secret to start activating his Shadow Driller Hanar. So Bunny Hopper has plays for the rest of the game. I don't think that's any more of a concern now. What is a concern is trying to figure out a board that is actually going to push meaningful damage.
He has seen the Time Rip, and he did play around Death, so he doesn't have too much information about whether or not that's there. So he can consider if he wants to just throw down a big Edwin. The thing with playing Edwin as a 4/4, it's just not going to be...
It doesn't do anything.
It's not... It doesn't do anything.
Right.
So I think he will have to play into Death at some point, so he has to consider whether he wants to do it now or perhaps save it for a bigger turn later. Maybe after he baits out some deaths with some other generated minions, but that's going to be quite a bit of time from now, so he does want to just get that in play now.
Generally, my rule with things like this is that you play around cards by playing into them. The earlier you play your Edwin, the less likely there's going to be a Shadow or Death in X-Bize's hand. So I like Bunny Hopper committing to it as early as possible.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, and also if he doesn't play the Edwin here, he's just not developing anything meaningful outside of the weapon, which doesn't really threaten much except for, you know, removal or punching for 5 damage.
Did X-Bize not get a...
I believe he did not get one there.
I think you're guaranteed that info that the Candle Taker was in hand. So if he wanted a Candle Taker, he would just take one. Because it only shows you cards that are like in the original deck list. And Candle Taker was not, which means that...
in hand.
Yeah, or generated in hand, which means that Candle Taker was generated in hand, because it was definitely not in Bunny Hopper's original deck list.
Do you think it was an oversight, or do you think he just doesn't value Candle Taker enough?
Well, it's hard to say, because maybe he is thinking 10 turns ahead. However, I probably would have just taken the Candle Taker, because it's a free card. I really don't think that overdrawing is going to be an issue here.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, with 6 cards in hand, he was planning on playing Thoughtsteal, but I think he had a good idea of what he wanted to do that turn, and with the death and the secrets that he took from... Well, I guess the secrets came after Thoughtsteal. I think that the Candle Taker would have been, like you said, a bit of a free card.
It's a free card. I don't think it really does much. Might even not get played this game, but I don't think having it is like detracting from their win condition. You know, Bunny Hopper is loading up
A lot
All
of damage.
phase.
Yeah. With Soul Mirror has been seen, right? He hasn't really been...
Not all phase.
there is, I believe, a spell he got from Renew earlier? Or, no, it was from the Veil Weaver, sorry. The Radiance in hand for X-Plies came from, I believe, a Septic Veil Weaver. So there's only one card in hand that Bunny Hopper is knows is generated. So with his natural Soul Mirror gone, he wants to create a big board now and try to end the game before Blaiz can generate more answers for something like this.
Looking for a Plague of Death. This has to be a Spell Lackey. Let's get a Soul Mirror. That's not a Spell Lackey. I think that means that X-Flies is almost guaranteed to lose this game. We can do the math. He might still be alive this turn. He gets a Penance and Radiance if he wants to.
The Kobold Lackey does let him clear up the Spherocat. A lot of damage is removed, but there's still a lot left over, and even if it's not lethal damage,
And
repetitive damage like this...
hand. Yeah, it's definitely not lethal, but the repetitive damage, like you're saying, is going to be the thing that ends up killing him.
Yes. Kronx is taken off the board. That can't be saved now later on for something like a scheme, but I think the amount of pressure and damage that it caused and pushed was just well worth giving up the chance for something like that. I think Bunny Hopper realizes that Blaiz just will not be able to deal with all of this stuff, so this is not a game that's going to go to fatigue for both players like we saw in the previous match, but one that will be ended, hopefully, by killing the Priest. Evolve Lackey coming out, kind of awkward on some of these buffed minions. Flick and Miscreant generally are understated, but with the Kronx buff, they do seem kind of, appropriately sized, so that Evolve probably won't come out here.
Yeah, I mean, for Bunny Hopper's side, it's just making sure to play around Murozon, not giving X-Flies any potential at winning this game. He's already seen, the Renew spells. He's seen the original copy of Soul Mirror. Is there a Plague of Death in X-Flies' deck? I believe there's a Plague of Death in Team Liquid's deck, but I don't think there's...
In Barcelona's Priest deck, there's no Plague of Death.
I don't think there's one, so... This has to generate a minion that generates something great, and that probably will not happen. Oh, Madame Lazul?
Oh?
No, there's really nothing.
No, not quite. Maybe if there was something in Bunny Hopper's hand, this could have helped. Nope, Doomsayer off of this won't go off in time. Even with the Wretched Reclaimer, it's not going to do much. Looks like Bunny Hopper is able to get there. A bit of a struggle at the start to maintain control of the board, but with the picks of Candle Breath, being able to find Togwaggle and the Crown, he is able to turn this into a win. So Team Liquid, with their Rogue queuing up against Barcelona's Priest, manages to take the win and evening up the series 1-1.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like a great approach to the matchup. Bunny Hopper sacrificed a lot of value in the early game to just try to keep the Priest off of board, and ended up panning out perfectly, right? He top-decked the Heist and Togwaggle, obviously, on the turn that he needed it, but without that aggressive style that he had in the early game, I just think he would have gotten rolled over and probably died. There was, at some point, there was an Imprisoned Vile Fiend with Apotheosis on it, and it was a 5/8, and Bunny Hopper couldn't answer for 2 turns. But the fact is that he played for tempo and ended up winning him the game, in my opinion. So I really liked his approach to that matchup.
Yeah, it ended up working real well. We're going to be taking a quick break, and we'll be back soon before the next game starts. welcome back. We're going to do a bit more analysis before we hop into the game 3 here, after Team Liquid won with Rogue against FC Barcelona's Priest. Now, Galen, do you know, or what would you think that FC Barcelona wants to queue into this Rogue now that the Rogue has gone through the Priest?
All right, let me take another quick look at the deck list real quick. So Barcelona has access to Mage, Shaman, Druid, Warlock, and Paladin remaining. So against Rogue, I think that Druid kind of dumpsters it. Not gonna lie, like there's really no other way of saying that. Glowfly Swarm early, Rogue really has no answer to that. You know, their sole answer is either A, to try to out tempo them with a questing adventurer or an Edwin, but that's a pretty inconsistent strategy. Or they have to hope that they'll have a Flick online in time to deal with the Glowfly Swarm, but those two different strategies often don't work out. So, you know, from the Druid's perspective, scary things are definitely questing adventurers first and foremost, Edwin first and foremost. But taking a look at Team Liquid's deck real quick, I believe that they do have copies of the yeah, they have 2 questing adventures in their deck, but I still think that Druid is a good queue into Secret Rogue.
Gotcha. Okay, so maybe we'll be seeing a Rogue. It looks like Zim will be up next piloting whatever deck they choose, and we'll see quickly after this what that deck will be. But first, we're going to be able to take a look at the caster ratings for this. Now, we, as casters for the international, we were asked to rate the international players as casters. So both of these both of these ratings are from us. Do you want to talk a bit about the difference between Zim and Bunny Hopper based on this?
Sure. I think that it's a... How do I phrase this? I think this matchup is probably, when we were going over the 12 players from the Western teams, I think that Zim and Bunny Hopper were probably the 2 most disparate in terms of ratings given. You know, when we compare experience, Bunny Hopper's experience at the World Championships, Zim's claim to fame is a 2nd place at a Masters Tour, which is a great achievement. I've done it too, but you know, it's not enough to say that, like, it's not nearly as much as Bunny Hopper has. In terms of macro and micro, I think that Bunny Hopper is one of the best players in the world. That's pretty inarguable at this point. You know, he's shown time and time again that he's insane to the game. Zim, we saw he avoided relegation last season in Grandmasters, which is great, but not by much. He was 1 game away from getting relegated. And that's a pretty shaky start to a season of Grandmasters. So in a lot of regards, I do think that Bunny Hopper is the overall stronger player. And I think it's going to be a pretty difficult match for Zim, at least in the head-to-head. That being said, Zim does decide to queue Quest Warlock, which is actually a bit interesting to me. I always feel like Quest Warlock is a bit unfavored versus Secret Rogue. Maybe you have a different opinion on that.
I found it's a little close. Honestly, I find myself biased towards whatever deck I'm playing because I think I'm just so good. But I have been proven pretty wrong.
Language
the
hacker.
stats that we've seen.
You're easily top 2 Romanian players. Okay, I'm not sure about top 1, but top 2 for sure.
That means a lot to me, Galen. Appreciate it.
It means a lot more to RDU, but continue.
As I was saying before I was rudely interrupted, I do think the matchup is close to even, as we saw from the stats provided to us by the broadcast. It can go kind of either way. With the big questing early that's left unanswered, Warlock does not run single target removal like Siphon Soul, for example, which would come down very late anyways. The main single target removal they have that actually kills a minion by itself is Kill Down the Breaker. But otherwise, if they don't have something like an Earthy Nether Breath or Dark Skies to do with the questing, that could be easily one of the ways that Rogue kind of takes it away. That being said, with Warlock having a good start with all of their removal tools into getting the quest completion with Plot Twist, it can end up being a very quick game for the Warlock as well, based on what gets tapped into. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of situations that can happen based on the, I think, opening starts of both players. The tempo of the game will be decided by what threats and the Rogue has available and what removal the Warlock has available.
Hot take for you, Language Hacker.
Go.
Most important card in this matchup doesn't start in either player's decks. It's the coin. I think who's ever going second with the coin has a much higher win rate than the person going first.
Interesting.
I think
Would you care to elaborate?
For Plot Twist specifically, you have 2 less cards less when you're shuffling in. For Rogue, I think it's pretty obvious that coin is insane for their game plan, with Edwin, Questing Adventurer, all of the combo cards and all of their power plays wanting to be accelerated by a turn. And I just think that it's a really invaluable resource, and whoever gets it has a huge advantage. I think we're going to see that pretty soon with Bunny Hopper having a coin with the Questing Adventure, and a Heist Baron Togwaggle in hand. So I really think that Bunny Hopper has a strong favorite in the early game so far of this match.
I think that's pretty fair, honestly. I was a little ready to jump and argue with you, but the more I've thought about it, actually it makes a lot of sense, because having the coin means that it's not necessarily the coin itself being able to play for an extra mana, but the fact that you have the coin means you have more resources available in the hand. And for Warlock, that means you're more likely to have your Plot Twist, you're more likely to have your Dark Skies or your removal. And for the Rogue, what that means is you're more likely to have threats. You have the coin can also proc stuff like you said, Questing Adventure or Edwin, that help you make a bigger board that's difficult to deal with. So I think I do agree with you there.
I think it'll be interesting to see what Bunny Hopper does the following turn, especially now
I
that
really
his Faceless Lackey is getting sniped. I imagine that Bunny Hopper was looking at something like Questing Adventure and then Shadow Stepping his Lackey to be able to use it with the Heist Baron Togwaggle ASAP. But now it gets a little bit harder, I would say.
Yeah. Questing can come down, but Shadow Stepping out of these minions doesn't really get you any extra value. In fact, Shadow Stepping the Stunner would just lose tempo on board. So if he is going to use Shadow Step, it would be on the shot bot. But Shadow Stepping a shot bot is basically using
it sounds pretty
Shadow
silly.
Step.
It sounds pretty silly.
Yeah, it's using Shadow Step for a +2/+2. So it comes down to, do you value +2/+2 that much right now, or would you rather use it to get some more value later because you don't think the +2/+2 is going to be enough to kind of push the Warlock out of the game?
In my opinion, I think what Bunny Hopper is going to go for here is he's going to play Titanic Lackey. Next turn is going to be something like Questing Adventure, Kobold Lackey, Shadow Step the Kobold Lackey, and the following turn will be, I guess since he used coin, I guess it'll just be the 5-drop, the Shield of Galakron. But the following turn will be the 0-mana Lackey plus the Heist Baron Togwaggle.
Yeah, it'll be a bit slower this way, but I do like this quite a bit. It puts a lot of health onto the board, which means something like Dark Skies will not be able to clear it.
Yep.
It also means that the Questing Kobold Lackey step next turn brings the Questing Adventure up to 4 health, which plays around something like Crazed Nethering coming down from Zim on turn 5. So it seems like with Bunny Hopper's play here, he gets a very strong board now and sets up for some very powerful turns up to and including turn 6.
This is a pretty new addition into Questlock, by the way. Sky General Crag. It's been around for actually quite a while. I believe it started in Descendant Dragons. Let me make sure that I get this right, because I don't want to sound silly on broadcast, even though I already do that all the time. Sky General Crag.
You don't have to worry about that. That's already happening.
Yeah. Sky General Crag is a minion from Galakron's Awakening, so it actually hasn't been around for a super long amount of time, but a couple months. In the initial Questlock builds, I don't think it really ever found a home. It just seemed pretty lackluster, mainly because a lot of times your game plan as Questlock was not playing a 4-mana minion, it was tapping into Plot Twist on turn 4. But it seems like recently it's found a resurgence in play. Do you know why that might be?
It gives you an extra tempo tool. It can also be used as removal, right? If you need to pressure some decks, which I don't think Quest Warlock for the most part really does need to do that. Maybe against something like Druid, it can help by presenting a bit of an extra threat that can help preemptively deal with a Glowfly Swarm, or help preemptively deal with something else later on, or respond to something like that. I think it's probably flexible enough that it can be used as removal and development. Even though development isn't, that crazy, it's still relatively powerful.
Gotcha. Bunny Hopper is still going for the strategy of just max tempo. Not using the lackeys to set up for a Heist Baron Togwaggle play on turn 6. He is forgoing that for just the biggest minions he can make. I think it makes a lot of sense when you look at what's happening from Zim's perspective.
Yeah, definitely. Zim, if he is able to deal with this, requires several cards to be able to do so. I don't believe Morg Artificer right now is going to do enough. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14. Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not going to be enough.
I don't think it's enough.
No.
Each minion is 4 hits, so that means that there's going to be 3 hits remaining for 6 damage each. Even if every single hit landed on Bunny Hopper's minion, this Bunny Hopper would still be left with a living Questing Adventure.
Likely a Questing Adventure, correct. But the only answer to this basically is exactly Morg Artificer Netherbreath, which still doesn't deal with the rest of the board unless there's also then a Rain of Fire, which is a lot of resources to kind of expend. And even if this does happen, Bunny Hopper still has pretty good refill with Shield of Galakron leading up to a Togwaggle turn 1 or 2 turns later.
For sure.
And like you're saying, pushing tempo right now, forcing the Warlock to have cards that it may not have. And when it doesn't have those cards, it can and likely will crumble. And this is kind of what we're seeing here. Looks like Zim's trying to be able to stop some of this bleeding. Looks like he's going for a Rain of Fire to help take some damage off the board. This does take 5 damage off the board, deals 1 damage to himself, but makes the board a bit easier to deal with over time. Hopefully trying to get something like a Dark Skies on the following turn to help clean up this questing adventurer.
For sure. From Bunny Hopper's perspective, I think the biggest thing that you can understand from Zim's turn is that he does not have a Nether Breath in hand. That is a card that you do not need to care about anymore. If Zim had a Nether Breath, 99% of the time it would be coming down that turn.
Yep.
Or he just doesn't have a dragon. Either scenario means that there's not an active Nether Breath right now for Zim. That being said, it's still probably a good idea to clear off this Moarg Artificer, especially because it doesn't really require that much sacrifice from Bunny Hopper's perspective. Even though it maybe reveals the Lackey to removal, which means that Togwaggle would come down a turn later. Even then, Bunny Hopper can just play the Shield of Galakron, get a Lackey back, and still be set up fine for turn 7. So I really like this play from Bunny Hopper. Max tempo. I think it's pretty obvious, but it's just a consistent game plan that he's been going for the entire time.
Definitely.
And just
There's
because
a lot of reasons.
Just because this turn was obvious, I don't think that means that, like, it's just a follow-up of a really good game plan for this matchup, if that makes sense. Like, he's already done the hard turns. He's on the easy turns now.
Mm-hmm. He's been following, like you said, consistent game plan. Everything he's been doing has been kind of push the tempo, force the Warlock to have answers, because as soon as the Warlock doesn't have the answers, it's just going to die. And it looks like that's what we're kind of seeing right now.
Yeah, the Warlock looks like it's just going to die. Ice Bear and Togwaggle, easily the play. You would be one off with a Shield of Galakron into Kobold Lackey this turn, but this is insane, right?
Yeah, again, it develops a board. I mean, Togwaggle is just a great card, right? Develops a board, gives you a great tool for next turn as well. Zim's really struggling to find some way to come back into this. I think this might be the turn where we will see something like a Plot Twist come out, because he will need some healing. Perhaps drawing some Aranasi Broodmothers off of the cards shuffle back into his deck to be able to come back. 4 health is definitely not safe.
He needs to Plot Twist into a Plot Twist, and then he needs to use the quest completion to get something. I really don't see other ways to win.
Yeah, I think he wants to try to soften up this board with Dark Skies first.
Yeah, it's a fine game plan, but it just seems...
It's one-off actually guaranteeing the clear.
That was really likely to happen, too.
Yeah, it was fairly likely. But this paired with the Dark Skies does end up being a full board clear. And even with Bunny Hopper having the Wondrous Wand, there isn't, I don't believe, any copies of Eviscerate in Team Liquid's Rogue deck. And what this means is that even though the wand will get a bunch of tempo off of it, it won't be any direct damage that comes off unless it's something like Galakron into Kronks.
This play from Zim just felt way too safe. I think he was probably supposed to take a risk somewhere in there, either to getting forward with his quest completion by not going for the Rain of Fire until after the Plot Twist, or, tapping, hoping that he draws an Aranasi Broodmother. I think the Plot Twist at the very end there was just way too ambitious with not that much going on.
Right. Like, to add to that, we can see the counter on the screen here. The quest is 15 cards out of 20 completed. Using that Plot Twist still cycled a few cards, but now that Zim has cleared the board, he still has to survive an extra, 4 turns? 3 turns maybe, if he starts tapping as well, perhaps 2 turns. And he still needs to be able to deal with everything that Bunny Hopper generates. So taking a risk there and Plot Twisting with perhaps more cards in his hand, getting himself closer to quest completion, closer to being able to get that tap into 0 mana cards would probably help him about a bit more.
And in my mind, I'm thinking you Plot Twist into a Mortal Coil. Sure, you take 2 extra from the Bone Wraith that lives, but the Mortal Coil now draws you another card. So you're 2 cards ahead, which means you're at 17 out of 20 instead of 15 out of 20. And it might only be, 1 or 2 instead of 3 or 4 turns to get that quest complete.
Mm-hmm. I think 1 coil is left in the deck if they're running 2. We use one. They used one earlier on the Faceless Lackey that popped up.
That might be right. It's definitely a risk. There's no guarantees when you Plot Twist, but...
Oh, definitely, yeah. Sometimes, like you said, even though it's a riskier and dangerous line, it may end up giving you a much higher win percentage because it gives you the chance to find some sort of more spectacular play than just clearing the board and hoping you can deal with a few more boards until the quest comes online.
Even here, I
Fortunately,
think Zim is supposed to probably tap. Like, this hand is just not getting it done, and you need cards sooner rather than later.
yeah, tapping does get him down to 5 health, which means he would be dead to dagger. I'd be kind of scared to tap, honestly, myself at this point.
I would be scared to tap too. There's really no changing that. That's not the point. The point is that you're at 16 out of 20. You're never tapping for the rest of the game now. You're just losing in all regards. You know what I mean? Like there's just no
I
hope.
agree. I think something needs to be done, and the way this game isn't panning out, it does not look like this was the way for Zim to win.
All right, Bunny Hopper's got 0 mana cards. Probably play those first. That seems like a really smart strategy.
Interestingly, he held them last turn. Why do you think that is?
Maybe he was trying to play around some various removal spells. I'm not totally sure, to be honest. I think playing them was probably better than not playing them.
Okay. I'm thinking maybe he wanted a bit more mana to work with his secrets, but I think
specifically the 0 mana dirty tricks could probably have come down.
Right. Oh, and saving the secondary tricks for later then. At least or holding on to the Shadow Jeweler.
I'm not sure about the 0 mana Shadow Jeweler. I don't think that's as important, but the 0 mana dirty tricks is definitely a card to consider.
Not much in terms of development here for in terms of minions for Bunny Hopper. He's starting to put up a lot of secrets here to try and craft a maze for Zim to crawl through if he wants to be able to stop.
You travel through some weird mazes, bud.
Yeah, there's a lot of question marks in my mazes. I don't get out of them very often.
Most people do not get out of the Shadow Jeweler Hanar maze unscathed.
Yeah.
When you do, though, you feel like a genius. All right. Well, Zim did not get through. Zim is dead.
We can see that it's a counterspell, but I don't think Zim was beating counterspell this game. So tapping, I think, was correct here to try and find something, even though it was a little late. Like you said, he would have liked to see the taps a bit earlier to try and get more out of it. But once the Sense Demons was picked up, I think that was Zim's best chance at getting out of this.
Yep. Bunny Hopper's one off right now. He kind of has this game in the bag, though. Zim would have to draw Alex Draws to the next turn. Even then, I don't really think it does anything.
Not with that entity. It still
Freezing
helps
Trap
quite a bit, actually.
Contests the 5/4 really well, so probably there's no need to play the Flick Skyship this turn.
Mm-hmm.
Can you get away with not playing the Faceless Lackey because Doomsayer is going to cause you to lose the game? That would be the last question that I have on my mind.
I don't think we're at 100% just yet from Bunny Hopper's point of view. I think it's very close to 100%, but I think if you look at the math, the chance of getting Doomsayer is probably lower than...
It's less than 1%, and I think that Bunny Hopper has around 1% to lose this game.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Knowing that he has Entity up, Alex Strauss would probably be the best case scenario for Zim to try and heal back up to 15. And with the Entity, that means that Bunny Hopper will also get an Alex Strauss, which means that he'd be facing 12 damage. So getting the Faceless Stacky down guarantees that you can push lethal as Bunny Hopper with an Alex Strauss as a defensive option.
I believe you're supposed to tap here because if you hit Aranasi Broodmother, you just get an extra couple points of life.
Yep.
Even though you go to -1, you heal up for another 4, and then you're fine. But yeah, this just...
It's definitely a cute interaction, but yeah, that definitely was the correct play.
For the record, I don't really think that Zim had much percent to win through a lot of these points in this game. But it was higher than 0. And I think the line that he went for took it closer to 0 rather than away from it. You know, maybe he had 5-10% max to win, but it just seemed like he played too passive and too scared. And even when your life total is at 7, 5, 4, you still kind of have to use it as a resource sometimes. So in the future, I'd like for him to, just complete the quest faster, because that's your primary win condition, even if that means that you lose a lot of the games that you're playing. And when you're in those spots where you're on the edge of the precipice, you still kind of have to go forward to the cliff sometimes. You have to keep progressing your game plan, even if you lose 99% of the times you do that. So
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. Now that Barcelona's Warlock has also fallen, which was the deck they queued into Team Liquid's Priest after Team Liquid had won game one, now Barcelona's on the back foot. Generally, in last year's standing, you want to be kind of bouncing back and forth. If you win the first round, you generally have an advantage, because at that point, if you're counter queuing back and forth, you'll come out on top because you'll get the 3 wins first. So in a best of 5, you will win the match. But now that Barcelona has lost the counter queue into Team Liquid's Rogue, what deck do you think they'll be looking for to kind of not only cinch this next game, but also the game after that with Team Liquid's response if they happen to lose game 4?
I mean, I still think that the answer is going to be Dragon Druid. I know that we were talking about how Questing Adventure is a really strong card in that matchup, and Bunny Hopper is running 2 of them. But to be honest, I think the Quest Warlock itself as a queue in this match was just not the highest win percentage line. I do think that Rogue is pretty favored versus Quest Warlock. It's a really hard matchup, and you're playing against Bunny Hopper, who is, in many respects, one of the best Rogue players in the world. Like, without a doubt. So I just think that, queuing a hard matchup against a really smart person on a deck that they're very comfortable with might not be as good as a strategy as, just queuing Dragon Spell Druid, hoping you draw Overgrowth and playing Glowfly Swarm. So I'd still kind of like them to play Druid next round. Otherwise, I don't think their Shaman makes that much sense. They have like a Hagatha's scheme Shaman, which is just very weird, probably unfavored versus Rogue lineup. But Galakrond, Dragonspell Druid has like a really high win rate versus that. What I was trying to say was, if they had Galakrond Shaman instead of their weird control Shaman, that could also be a potential queue. I think that Galakrond Shaman has a lot of merit versus Rogue. A lot of times against Rogue, they summon a bunch of lackeys, 4/5s, a bunch of low attack, high health minions, Evil Miscreant, for example, and you can capitalize on that really easily with Galakrond Shaman. You have a card called Mogu Flesh Shaper. Mogu Flesh Shaper reduces the cost for the number of minions in play. So whenever they play a bunch of minions, you play a Mogu or 2 and then evolve them, and then you win the game. And that happens a lot. So if they had Galakrond Shaman, I could recommend that instead. But they don't. So really, to me, the only choice is Dragonspell Druid. That was a long, windy road to say Druid is the next pick.
No, it's not only good to ask your opinion on which deck it is, but why as well, because it makes we get to follow your entire train of thoughts, which is why we love having you here, Galen. This is why we love you here. Now, Druid's probably going to be the queue, from your opinion at least, and I think mine as well. I think Druid's likely going to be what they're going to queue up next. And in a format like this with 10 classes, even though we do have quite a bit of talking points about what can be queued, what can be brought, what gets banned, etc., we don't actually get to talk about every single class, because not all of them are going to be brought up in the match. Now, you did point out that Barcelona's Shaman is a little bit wackier than what we're normally used to. It still has Galakrond and has a bunch of the invokes, but like you said, it's a bit more control-y, I suppose. Do you want to talk a bit more about what some of the unique cards in this deck are that we wouldn't see in normal Galakrond Shaman?
Sure. I mean, there's just a bunch of things that are different about this. First of all, I think most importantly, they're actually running the Galakrond payoff card in Dragon's Pack. A lot of the Galakrond Shamans that we see kind of forgo that option. It got nerfed during one of the Descent of Dragons patches from 5/6 taunts to 4/5 taunts, and that actually totally changed the card, and it seemed pretty weak. To be honest. However, if you're running Fist of Raden, a card that summons 2 4/5s with taunt for 5 mana, that's a spell, also summons another random 5 mana card, and that's a really powerful payoff. So I think it makes a lot more sense in this list compared to like an Evolved Galakrond Shaman list, the one that you'd see John Bray piloting on ladder, for example. But beyond that, there's a bunch of really weird inclusions in this list. Like, let me just read off a couple cards. Lady Vash, Marsh Spawn, not devoted, but yeah, that's obviously in the Galakrond. Hex, Fists of Raden, 2 Hagatha schemes, and a Siamet. There's a Siamet.
Also, Lightning Bolt. We don't see Lightning Bolt too often in these decks as well.
That one at least is like kind of aggressive. Like I can't fault them for lightning bolting someone in their face, but Siamet.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely wacky, and that's why I kind of wanted to highlight it. It seems like it's a bit more control-y, not full control, because I don't think it would be able to stand up against something like Priest or Rogue that can have a lot more card generation. But it does feel like it's tailored to be a bit more, a bit slower than Galakrond Shaman, maybe a bit anti-aggressive, perhaps.
Oh, they decided to go for Highlander Mage.
Interesting.
That's
So
very
Swids
interesting to
being
me.
the final player for Barcelona in this match, he either has to win out from here, or if he loses, the match goes to Team Liquid. I do know Swids likes to play Highlander Mage, and I think we've seen him pilot this quite a bit through Grandmasters as well as earlier in this tournament as well. I think he was piloting Mage earlier on Monday.
Sure. And if you look at the matchup spread remaining for Team Liquid, if Highlander Mage gets a win against Rogue, the matchups that they could potentially queue into are Team Liquid's own Highlander Mage, Evolved Shaman, like I mentioned before, Dragon Spell Druid, and Murloc Paladin. So not a terrible spread for Highlander Mage if you consider it. There's no Highlander Hunter to like come in and just ruin your day.
So even though we talked about Druid being probably one of the best or likely matchups against Rogue, maybe Barcelona is afraid of queuing up the Druid, knowing that some of the more aggressive decks that can take advantage of Druid's slow starts, such as Murloc Paladin, for example, or Galakron Shaman, can counter the Druid. So maybe they're looking for something that has a bit better spread, like you were talking about, just like Team Liquid ended up queuing Rogue when it has a better spread versus some of the more polarizing decks.
Sure, definitely. Murloc Paladin is not a great deck, but against Druid specifically, it's really powerful. You just play a bunch of stuff and then they die. And that happens a lot of games. So, I can see why Barcelona is going for this Highlander Mage. They want to reduce the polarity in terms of matchup spread.
Mm-hmm. Now, from Swid's perspective, in Highlander Mage in general, do you like just playing or keeping Doomsayer to play it on curve to try and inhibit some of the development, or do you like saving it later on in tandem with the freeze, or perhaps resetting the board after a board clear?
I think it's okay. In fact, I think Swids' mulligan here, where he keeps the Doomsayer, Arcane Intellect, Escape Mana Saber, is totally reasonable. Doomsayer lets you kind of accomplish your game plan in the mid game without taking too much damage. AI and Escape Mana Saber are both like really important tools. AI just being extra cards, and Escape Mana Saber being a minion that Rogue can't really interact with. Swids Mulligan makes a lot of sense, I think.
Okay. Something I want to point out as well, that Transfer Student actually shows up in FC Barcelona's Mage list, something that I have not seen too much in the other teams' lists in Mage. The other teams' lists tend to have something a bit more standard, but it looks like Barcelona wanted to include some more early game options to be able to deal with some of the tempo decks that may be out there.
I'm not gonna lie, Language Hacker, I still have yet to memorize the effects that Transfer Student has on each board, and the game that we are looking at is in Chinese, so when a Transfer Student pops up in hand, I will have no idea what that does. Just giving you that.
You're telling me you do not know what it does on this board?
Okay, so this is the feat board. I believe that is the official terminology. This is the feat board.
Sure.
So, like, if you're Barcelona here, do you love to see feat with Transfer Student? It's reborn. It's reborn.
I mean, production just whispered into your ear, but I was going to say that it was reborn anyways. Yes, it is reborn, which happens to be pretty good, honestly. A 2-mana 2/2 reborn minion is pretty powerful. It's something that you are pretty happy to see off of something like Pharaoh Cat from the Rogue's perspective. So I think running something like that in your deck will be pretty powerful, especially when you are trying to get to your late game sort of power cards, which Mage generally tends to do.
Sure, absolutely. Doomsayer here seems like not that important. You shut off the questing adventure, but I don't think they're really playing questing adventure anyways on turn 3. You could ping your own face to play around Seal Fate.
I think I still like the Doomsayer. Even though it's not super likely that questing adventure might come down, this does stop any development. I mean, best case for Swids, if he doesn't play the Doomsayer, is that Bunny Hopper either Seal Fates or just hits face and redaggers. With that being the case, I'd still like to just stop development and make sure that you can get to your Mana Saber without having to deal with any threats from Bunny Hopper's side.
I guess my point being is that I don't think that the development for Bunny Hopper's side comes in the form of minions this turn.
You think it would just be Seal Fate, basically?
Seal Fate, a Secret, potentially. I think both of those make a lot of sense.
Do you think a Secret would have been played on turn 2 instead of Dagger?
Well, there's a bunch of secrets in Bunny Hopper's deck, and when you're drawing, 1 of 5 cards out of 24, there's a 19-20% chance that you have a secret the following turn, which is that's a real number. That's a significant portion of time.
Coining up the Mana Saber here. Do you like this more than sticking on curve and going intellect to Mana Saber?
This is super weird to me. I feel like I would have definitely preferred to have just AI'd into this Escape Mana Saber and save that coin for later. I'm looking at this hand of, you know, Deep Freeze, Calicos, and Reno and thinking that mana is more important than early game development.
Yep, I think I agree as well, especially without Bunny Hopper having early cards like Pharaoh Cat, Spy Mistress, or any Reborn minions. I do think this is a little weird as well, using the coin early. Getting something into play is still very powerful, but like you said, having, how much is this, 31, 37 mana worth of cards in hand makes me kind of want to hold on to the coin as well.
For sure. What's funny is that this actually lines up pretty well into what Bunny Hopper's turn is. Bunny Hopper has to go for a 4/4 Edwin. Obviously not what he wants to do, but if he didn't do that, then he really just has no actual tempo game plan. And Swids is now free to just go AI ping, kill the 4/4, and he's in a pretty decent spot overall.
Ooh. With a Reno pickup.
Okay, now you never do that. Just disregard everything that I just said. We're never don't
Swids
do
is considering
anything.
it, but yeah, I think it'll be difficult for Bunny Hopper to generate enough health to play around Reno next turn pretty safely, and even if he does get a bit over 10 health, the Mana Saber itself can still swing for 3 damage and let Reno come down. But the important thing is that you get another minion down early while clearing the board. It's not necessarily that you're dealing 10 damage from Swid's perspective.
For sure. I mean, okay, so Swids has the option now. There is 2 options. You can either A, kill the 4/4 with the ping, set up for a Twilight Drake the next turn, or take the 4 damage and set up for an amazing Reno. And the more I think about it, the more I actually like the ping here, just because if you want to play Reno the following turn, and you're going to be hitting into a Shield of Galakron, you're kind of losing the benefit of your minion anyways. So in my mind, like, if you could hit face with that 3/5, then yes, I would save it for the Reno the following turn, because then you actually have 2 threatening minions. But if you don't do that and use the hit, you're going to be hitting into a taunt. And it's going to be a 3/1. And it's just going to die to the dagger, and you're left with a 4/6 taking 5 extra damage. So if I really had to think about it, I actually kind of liked the hit ping from Swids' perspective.
Okay, interesting. I only have one question about what you just said. How does the amazing Reno come down next turn?
So Reno the Relic, there's like 8 million of them now at this point, okay? Language
Hey,
hackers.
there's 2 in Standard. I think as Grandmasters, we should be able to differentiate between Reno the Relicologist, who is clearly not wearing a hat.
The 6 mana one, okay? Does that help?
Okay. Yes, it does. Thank you.
The one with the laser
Some
cannon.
of us do not recognize the name, so I think it's important to point out which Reno we're talking about.
Well, the Mage Reno, obviously.
Of course. Thank you for clarifying.
Does that draw change anything with Rustied Raider? You get a Rustied Raider and you save the Reno for the next turn?
And the main thing is, even if you did want to play Reno this turn, I think I like this option a lot more, because if you have to play Reno the Relicologist, swinging the Mana Saber into the Shield of Galakron is very yucky.
We just talked about that. And I like this hit from Swids, just playing around Togwaggle, which we see in Bunny Hopper's hand. So, you know, it actually ended up working out super well for Swids here, that he saved this game Mana Saber. However, that was a top deck Rustied Raider, so it's hard to say for certain.
I mean, the matchup may not be so favored for Mage that Swids thinks he can play it super safely, and maybe he thought he needed to kind of, have a sort of backup plan in case something unexpected pops up.
That could definitely be the case.
Bunny Copper checking some boxes here, seeing what's in the cat and the miscreant. Wants to find a way to deal with this Mana Saber.
That's Shadow Death, Clever Disguise, and Sprint. I don't think you ever take Sprint. That one's just out of the picture. Shadow Death actually has some pretty interesting merits versus Mage, but I think that Clever Disguise also makes a lot of sense, just finding answers outside of your deck.
Yeah, definitely. The other options were a little bit too slow, even though Shadow of Death would become kind of handy later on. Unfortunately, Bunny Hopper is not able to get rid of the Mana Saber, so Swids does have access to a bit more mana than he otherwise would. I'm not sure it's going to come into play too much here. The most he could technically do is swing, play Malagos, and ping, which may be what he's looking towards doing, but I think clearing
Don't just
up this
Reno
entire
Jackson's board, or Reno the Relicologist?
You're making it too easy, Gil. Yes. I do, yeah. I think you do just jam Reno the Relicologist. I'm just trying to figure out
Reno
if there
Jenkins?
anything...
I think that's his name. Max damage would be to hit the 1/4. It doesn't really matter, though. It's the difference between 8 and 9. They both easily get killed by the...
Yep. The important thing is just hitting a 1 attack minion here because there's 11 health on board, so Reno doesn't fully clear the board.
Yeah.
Unless a hit like this is made.
Yep. Reno the
like
Ophthalmologist did a really good job on that board.
Max tempo here. Are you Googling synonyms?
I don't think that was a synonym, but...
With 1 extra mana here, Bunny Hopper could clean up this board pretty effectively with a Twin Twiron. Unfortunately, Rogue is not known for its ramp, so he's still limited to 7 mana this turn. He gets to finally clean up the Mana Saber here while developing Togwaggle. Probably what he wants to be doing now, getting some tempo back now that Swids has been taking the front foot here. So Wand is probably the best way for him to do that, although I could see him perhaps taking Crown. He does have a lot of cards in hand. No, it is Wand.
Wand is just, like, in terms of max tempo, Wand is like a bunch, right? You often have hits that just immediately win the game. Like Sky Shiv, Galakron, Edwin, there's a bunch of stuff off Wand that you can get. I'd say that, like, in this matchup, I pretty much default to Wand 95% of the time. And that changes, like, in very limited cases where maybe both players are, like, at the end of their deck and you kind of used all your power cards and need to go for something like a Xerax Crown. But even then, like, 95% of the time it's Wand.
Yeah, that's fair. There's some matchups that I do like Wand a lot less in, where
Sure.
I feel like
Yeah,
Rogue does
sure.
need to push. Yeah. I just want
Specifically
to...
just against Mage.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's a very important tempo swing to bridge
Definitely.
the gap to the Amazing Reno.
Mm-hmm.
The exciting
There is
Reno.
also freeze in hand too. I think the exciting. Yes, having plenty of options to be able to get to that Amazing Reno with Malagos' Flame Strike, Blizzard if a board needs to be frozen. Although I think it's more likely we see something like a Deep Freeze coming up soon instead of Blizzard, unless Bunny Hopper finds a lot of very playable cards this turn that present enough of a threat.
Not the strongest wand. That was actually a
Behold
mana
the
loss
armies.
on that wand. It went
Yeah.
-1, which is pretty sad.
Behold the armies of Stormwind. Do you know that card?
Varian Rin, yeah.
Nice. Hats off to you.
Thanks, bud.
Okay, so Bunny Hopper has to figure out, after this very underwhelming wand, how can he wiggle his way back into this game. He does have Kronks available, not this turn though, so eventually he can get Galakron online, but right now he has to kind of dig through what his hand has to find some way. Oof, these are kind of heavy.
Overflow is really not the card that you want.
Yeah. You remember how he turned down Sprint because it cost 7 mana?
Yeah, and it drew 4, and that was a lot. And this one draws 5.
This draws 5, but it's still a little expensive for Bunny Hopper.
No. Drawing more is worse than drawing less right now.
What do you mean? How is he going to find Galakron?
I mean, you could always just
There's-
rely on the awe-inspiring Reno to draw you some cards.
It's true. Transfer Student finally picked up the card we were talking about earlier. A lot less useful at this point in the
Doesn't
game.
do
but
anything.
can still be
It's
used.
just a 2/2 with Reborn. Let's focus on what's important.
Okay.
Power creation, finding... I kind
Powerful
of like the
minis.
5/6s. Maybe that's
Interesting.
wrong. Maybe the
I
life
like
total
this.
is more important.
I like this. Life total. This has some flick protection as well because the power of speak of flick. The power of creation is
Sure.
excellent at getting you ahead on board from the mage's perspective. But if something like a flick comes down, you basically hand the rogue away to get back onto the board. And if the 5/6s were picked up here, the flick could have completely destroyed both of them, kill the Malagos as well, gain control of the board, and suddenly the rogue is a little bit on the front foot. But this way, even though the 3/4s are a bit smaller than the 5/6s, I like that Swids picked this as a bit of protection against flick. And like you said, it also protects your life total as well.
As soon as you said flick, I agreed with you. I was like, wow, that was really dumb on my part to not say Cartoon Defender. So, yeah, this definitely makes a lot more sense.
Strength of numbers pulling out.
That's
Ferrocat.
insane!
Yeah, well, I mean, Togwaggle and Kronks are both kind of the minions you wouldn't want to see get pulled. Fortunately, Togwaggle has been played already, and we can see Kronks in Bunny Hopper's hand, so there wasn't really...
I think
Go
Kronks
ahead.
is fine, right? Like, a 6/6 is big.
It's true.
Oh, wow.
That's even bigger. Anubiseth
we-
Warbringer.
Is he supposed to do
Warbinger?
anything here? Like, is he supposed to Shadow Step a minion to try to, like, make it bigger?
I'm not sure. This game is getting close to turn 10, so something like an Amazing Reno after a freeze here
Yeah, you're right.
might just completely nullify this this Anubiseth Warbinger.
But you could kind of, like, force out the Amazing Reno on the Anubiseth Warbringer by Shadow Stepping minions back to your hand. I don't really think that's, like, a bad thing to do. If they're using Amazing Reno to clear one big minion, I think it's, like, a fine spot to be in.
Agreed. But I feel like the Shadow Step probably gets more value
Sure.
than threatening an extra +3/+3 in hand. Especially now that the game has gone long enough that the mage can start pumping out the Amazing Reno, Kalagos, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. We're at a point in the game where I think Bunny Hopper wants to save Shadow Step for something more impactful, like example, a Flick.
That does make a lot of sense. And I mean, Shadow Stepping here just plays around the Amazing Reno really well, and you still kind of set up for the like the threatening board state of, like, if they don't vanish the Anubiseth Warbringer, then that +3/+3 buff is going to hit a ton of minions. So
Yeah, it's going to be hard to generate Vanish now that it's in Hall of Fame, but I think I get what you're saying.
I have nothing to add. I have nothing to add.
All right, Swiss has to consider if this is threatening enough to disappear with Reno. It looks like he chooses not to. He's going for
Disappear is a
Kalagos here.
synonym of vanish, okay? Let that be clear, all right? If something vanishes and you say that disappeared, it's the exact same thing, language hacker.
Okay. He does have the option to...
I will look it up for you. All right, synonyms.
No, I agree. I didn't.
I'll tell you.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Synonym of disappear. Okay.
While Galen pursues this vendetta,
Vanish.
we will
Number
talk
one,
about...
it's a verb, and then it's pass from sight is the next one. So if you wanted to pass from sight the minions, you could also do that. But first synonym is vanish.
You're correct. Vanish is a synonym of disappear. However, disappear
Yes.
is what shows up on the Amazing Reno's card text.
I'm
So moving
smart.
on. Swids has the option to clear this board with Malagos' Flame Strike, but he will provide a +3/+3 buff to every minion in Bunny Hopper's hand this way because of the Anubiseth Warbinger's Death Rattle. He chooses not to Amazing Reno this, deciding that it's...
Blizzard better there?
That's what I was trying to get at. I don't know if freezing this was better to try and kind of coax Bunny Hopper to play more minions into the field so that Amazing Reno can end up dealing with this a bit better. It looks like he thinks clearing is more important. He does know that Flick's in hand, so this is a little weird to me that he's maybe he's trying to bait out the Flick on the Kalagos so that he can
Right.
develop with Alexstrasza after this.
Here's my thought process, right? If you play the Blizzard last turn, you say the Flame Strike for the following turn, right? If they decide to flick your 412, because it's a scary 412, you follow up with your Amazing Reno, that's the name of the car, and you make everything disappear. All right? You're following me so far, right?
I see what you're talking about. Disappear made it very
Right,
clear
disappear. Okay. And then, like, you've dealt with the Anubiseth without giving that value. If they decide not to flick it, then all you have to do is you Flame Strike the following turn and you have Alexstrasza follow up. So I think you actually end up, like, kind of what's the
for me.
word?
Need some help there?
Check baiting. You're confusing me, all right? Checkmating him with the Blizzard instead of the Malagos.
Jokes aside, I do agree with you here. I think Malagos' Flame Strike there was not what I would have done either. I like the line you were discussing a bit more. Actually, a lot more now that I'm thinking about it. Blackjack Stunner will bounce Kalagos back to the hand. The mana cost of this can go above 10, so Kalagos is not playable anymore this game unless some sort of mana reduction happens to Swid's hands, which could happen with the Amazing Reno.
I'm a little bit disappointed that we haven't been able to play this Dragon Queen Alexstrasza at this point. I think with the lines that we agreed on, there's probably a way to get this Dragon Queen Alexstrasza down.
It's one thing to keep controlling the board, but eventually you do need to present some threats yourself. And I think what we were discussing allows Swids to take that sort of development. But here he's kind of giving initiative back to Bunny Hopper again, knowing that there's a Flick in hand to deal with the Caligos for 4 mana, allows Bunny Hopper 6 more mana to develop other stuff as well, which is what... actually, Flick didn't even come down this turn. There was the Blackjack Stunner. But regardless of the Blackjack Stunner, it still would have led to a similar sort of situation here where his board would have been cleared and more minions would have been developed.
Right.
Repair Scoundrel here, picking up another Power of Creation, which is still useful. Value is a thing. Mage can't generate stuff every single turn like Rogue can with the Galacron Hero Power. So value can come into play here, but I'm more concerned about being able to find a tempo option for Swids, where allowing him to actually start pushing some damage and controlling the board once he's ahead, not trying to develop after clearing boards or delaying the game longer.
For sure. And I think that Bunny Hopper can pretty much curate his Galacron at this point. There's only 6 cards left in the deck, so he pretty much knows every single card that he can draw. Like when he plays Galacron next turn, there's going to be, 4 out of 5 cards being drawn.
Yep, that's true. Do you find this matchup goes to fatigue on one side or the other often, or do you find the game ends a lot quicker?
Not that often for me. This is a pretty interesting game. It generally does not go to fatigue, in my opinion. Maybe ends with like 6 or 7 cards left in the deck, but this one, I think Bunny Hopper is going to be like probably 1 or 2 cards left in fatigue before the game ends.
Yep.
So it's like 7 cards ahead of where it would normally be, in my opinion.
Makes sense.
Swizz does...
able to...
Go ahead, sorry.
Swizz does use this Flame Strike pretty effectively and is able to clear the board without having to commit the Amazing Reno, perhaps choosing to save it for a much more threatening board. I think there is still 1 or 2 questing adventures left in the deck, and Edwin has already come down, we know that.
Grizzled Wizard is the card on the left, and that has Battlecry, swap hero powers with your opponent until the start of your next turn. Now, I have a pretty cool story to tell you about Grizzled Wizard. If you swap hero powers with your opponent that's playing Quest Warlock,
Yes.
and then they're at 19 out of 20 on their quest, and then they complete their quest, at the end of your turn, you get their hero power, and they're left with your shoddy whatever hero power, or they're just normal life tap. So you can actually like steal Quest Warlock's reward if you time it correctly.
Interesting. I haven't seen that in action. Perhaps it's a tech card that can be considered in some matches going forward. That aside, I think CMAT is the much stronger option here, generating a very threatening minion.
No. I was not trying to...
the 3/2.
Yes. Yeah. I agree
I know. I'm just trying to point out what's important. Is this the turn that we will see Swidz pop the Amazing Reno? Or do you think that he wants to delay it a little more, maybe throw out a Blizzard instead?
Ray of Frost also has some like decent merit here. You just have to worry,
Sure.
like I guess you kind of have to worry about the questing adventure getting out of control.
Yeah. That is the second copy of Ray of Frost, so even though Ray of Frost can stop CMAT from dealing 12, the questing could still come in for a lot of damage.
Excuse me, I was so busy telling my story about Grizzled Wizard.
That's fine.
He's not going for it, just going for Blizzard.
I have seen, I want to note, and not in just this game, I've seen Switz play this match, or not necessarily this matchup, but this deck very, very greedily. I feel like unless he's under very direct threat of dying, he will try to hold off on resources that are valuable, such as the Amazing Reno, until it's absolutely necessary and try to squeeze a lot of value out of it. And granted, this is still a lot of value it gains. It gets rid of a CMAT, a questing adventure, and a relatively large Blackjack Stunner at this point. But he feels that he wants to use Blizzard here instead because it's harder to use Blizzard as removal in tandem with Ray of Frost, and he values having Reno just as another clear later on, which is, I think, very interesting.
It's just like, it's so hard to tell, because I guess like from Swizz's perspective, you kind of can just take 14 from the Tiamat. Like you're at a very healthy life total. But it's not at all how I play this matchup. And I'd like to see how it works out. It still doesn't look like it's going to work out.
It might still work out, honestly.
He's
There's
going
not
to
that many threats left in Bunny Hopper's hand, right? He knows what cards are left for the most part outside of generated cards. He knows there's a Kronks and a Flick, but beyond that, there aren't that many minions left in the deck for Bunny Hopper.
Sure, but Kronks is a lot of threat, especially with the Shadow Step.
This is true. That's fair.
I think this was always going to be Amazing Reno from Swids. There's really no other play.
I think one of the reasons, now that I'm thinking about it, that is beneficial for Swids to play greedily and kind of delay the game like this and hold off on the important removal until absolutely necessary is because it lets him draw and see more cards in his deck. We're at the point where obviously Bunny Hopper's in fatigue because he's drawn a lot more cards, but there's not that much card draw in the Mage deck for Barcelona here. So with 10 cards left in the deck, Swids has been able to delay the game so far that he is likely going to be seeing all of his important cards. He'll be seeing the Amazing Reno, Zephyrus, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, and maybe that's one of the benefits of taking a matchup like this a lot more slowly, gives him the chance to hit those power cards.
Sure. At the same time, though, Swids probably could have gotten down this Alexstrasza, this Dragon Queen Alexstrasza specifically at some point, and that might have been able to like just force Bunny Hopper on the back foot. You are right, though, that Swids still has Zephyrus in his deck, and I think that's going to be kind of like the most important card that Swids can draw, just because it will remove the next big wave of stuff. And Bunny Hopper really only has one or two more big waves of stuff. So if Swids can check one of those, I think he'll be in a really good spot to win this game.
Makes sense. I see Bunny Hopper do this a lot on Rogue, where he sets up a board preemptively before playing Kronks. I think a lot of players can just end up playing Kronks for an 8-8 here, but setting up this board gives the threat of Kronks without actually having to play Kronks.
That's really interesting because Swids now can actually play his Kalecgos again. It's 11 mana, but now it's reduced in cost by 1. It's just pretty funny to me.
That is interesting. Do you think that's something Bunny Hopper had considered?
I mean,
that's not something
you got to develop your 8/7. I don't really think that it's a mistake. It just
it's interesting. I'm glad you pointed it out.
Is Kalecgos not just... I mean, I guess you got to fit in a Bone Wraith alongside this, but wasn't Kalecgos just a higher odds to win?
What are you looking for off of Kalecgos? A freeze, perhaps?
Blizzard, freeze, Ray of Frost. Ray of Frost is insane specifically because of Generous Mummy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Kalecgos just better here?
So
any freeze effect, Cone of Cold?
If one of those are hit, I think that would definitely be better. I want to try to consider what Swids was thinking when he did this. So he knows that Bunny Hopper has Kronks left in hand with a Shadow Step and a Flick that costs 4 mana. I think he's trying to figure out if he misses on the freeze, how much damage can actually get pushed through with Kronks, for example. Kronks Shadow Step would add 16 damage to the board. We have 13 damage currently showing for Bunny Hopper, so that would be
but
well
you also
over
have to remember that Bunny Hopper has access to a Blackjack Stunner. So like and that's like guaranteed info. Like he knows about all of this in hand.
Right, but the Blackjack Stunner here will not let Bunny Hopper actually play Kronks with Shadow Step to do the lethal damage. So even though it still pushes a lot either way, regardless of whether there's a taunt, playing the taunt, I think, unless there were very fortunate wand pulls in terms of mana reduction, which I think Swids knows there's only one card left that should cost 0 mana in Bunny Hopper's hand, which we see as a Shadow Step. This plays around a lot of combination of cards, as long as Kronks isn't 0 mana. I do think it's a slower line that is like you were saying, this isn't necessarily it's a riskier line to do what you're saying, but it wins a lot more often if you do hit that freeze, which I do like. But I think Swids was trying to, again, delay the game a bit longer to try and get to that Zephyrus with only 9 cards left. Because if he still hits a freeze this following turn, it's still pretty useful for him, right?
Sure. It's just... It's really hard to say, right? It's like the same issue that I had with Zim earlier. Oh, well, there's the Zephyrus. That's probably going to win him the game. But in my mind, I think that just like having the ability to like, what's the word for it? Sure, you don't get the guaranteed value of the taunt, but you get like the percentages, and you don't always win every single game of Hearthstone, and sometimes it comes down to like the 30, 40, 50% or whatever. Like he got to see 2 cards this turn because Amazing Reno randomly drew an extra card, and then it just so happens that out of the top 10 cards of his deck, Zephrys was one of them. So that's like a less than 10% chance of happening. I think you're much higher than 10% odds of finding a freeze effect off of Caligos, for example. So in my mind, it's just like Caligos is the higher odds. This panned out perfectly. He did get the Zephrys. I just don't think it was the highest odds of winning.
Okay, I think that's fair. Zephrys offering Soul Cleave here, together with the Astromancer Solarian, will heal Swids up for quite a bit here.
Yep.
While allowing him to also get rid of Bunny Hopper's board with the Frost Elementals that were on board earlier.
Bunny Hopper had to play a Dirty Tricks to activate his Black Trick Thunder last turn, which means that he's now taking boatloads of damage. Yeah, the game is just over at this point. Zephrys was a clutch draw for Swids. They managed to take the win. The very greedy strategy that ends up panning out right at the last second with the Zephrys top deck at the very end. So
I think it might have been the last possible turn where it could have worked, right? I think one turn later and it might have been too slow.
It was literally the last possible turn. That being said, he still had the opportunity to go for a Caligos and try to find a freeze effect, which is a little bit like offloading it for another turn, but offloading it for another turn means that he gets that 1 extra card draw for his Zephrys. So it ends up working out. Early game was really interesting as well. I think he kind of played the greedy strategy all the way through, saving his pings, instead trying to set up for Amazing Reno, getting a Rusty Raider off the top, and that panning out really well. So, very greedy strategy, not something that I personally would have done in that game, but it ends up panning out.
Yeah, I tend to play a bit more aggressively, like you're saying as well. I just wanted to consider what Swids was thinking when he went for the taunt line instead of the Caligos. I do think I agree with you that it's better to take risks in unfavored situations to try and get those advantages where you otherwise might just start losing more slowly instead of winning faster.
Yeah. It did end up actually panning out. So we can't really blame him. The win is the most important thing, even if it's not specifically the lines that you or I would have taken. The scoreboard is what matters. So we're going into Game 5, last here standing. Team Liquid will have to choose a deck to counter Barcelona's Mage. And from what they have remaining, it seems like they have Druid, Paladin, Shaman, and Mage themselves. I think of those, it seems like the most likely will be the Mage Mirror, but maybe you have a different opinion on that.
Interesting. So in my experience, I've seen Druid isn't necessarily what you want to queue into Mage. It's an interesting matchup on both sides, but I don't think that it's necessarily Druid favored. I think Shaman might not be the queue into Mage as well, but I haven't played enough Galakron Shaman specifically against Mage. That's tends to be more uncommon matchup. Mage isn't one of the most popular decks to play in the meta right now, although it does have some good matchups, which is why I believe Barcelona here did queue it up here. I think it is going to likely be the Mage Mirror, which is maybe not exactly what you want to see if your best matchup against their remaining deck is a 50-50 in theory. Obviously, tech cards can play a factor into that, but I'm not sure if they think that Shaman is better than the Mage Mirror. I think I also would queue up the Mage Mirror here as well. And we can see some pretty wacky stuff in Mage Mirrors if we end up getting late game enough to where Amazing Reno comes down for both players and random cards start flying out left and right based on the hero powers.
Yeah, a lot of the power cards that matchup do things that are unexpected, to say the least. Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron, Amazing Reno, Power of Creation to the lesser extent, a bunch of Discover cards, Astromancer Solarian and Solarian Prime. It can get very crazy very quickly. And it should be a very exciting game. I think you were talking earlier about the specific tech cards. Excuse me. I am going to take a look here, see if we can find anything that really stands out. From my perspective on Team Liquid's side, they have a couple weird ones that I don't really think changes too much in the Mage Mirror matchup. They've got a Waste Warden and an Acidic Swamp Ooze. I don't really think those do too much to counter the Mage strategy. I guess sometimes Waste Warden might land on a couple dragons, but beyond that, it doesn't seem that powerful. For Barcelona's perspective, they do have a Volpera Scoundrel. That could change a lot. An extra Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron would be huge in that matchup. But there's no real tech card that you can have to just like win the Mage Mirror, unfortunately. So it will come down a lot to I think the draw and the effects of the spells that are being cast, and also like the skill of players, like when to decide to go in with a puzzle box Yogg-Saron, when to like capitalize on a Zephrys. I think those decisions are going to matter a lot in this next matchup if they end up both being mage.
Yeah, definitely. If we do see a Mage Mirror, it'll be interesting to see if they also have different play styles. We've seen Swids tend to play the mage, the Highlander mage, a bit more greedily and kind of holding stuff until it's absolutely necessary. But I feel like in the mirror, I wonder if a more tempo-oriented game plan would lend itself better in that matchup.
I mean, it's really hard to say because I feel like every single mage matchup ends up playing out differently. Like you can't really have a standardized mage game, if that makes sense. So it often comes down to like unexplored territory. Who is best at determining what to do when neither player really knows what's going on? And in my mind, okay, so it looks like we're gonna have Frozen versus Swids. And I think I would give the edge to Frozen on that one. I think that he's had a lot of experience doing unexplored territory in terms of gameplay. You know, what sticks out to me is probably, they're going for Galakron Shaman. What sticks out to me with Frozen is he really likes taking risks. If you can remember in 2016, last call, where the top 8 point earners were trying to vie for a spot to compete at the World Championship, Frozen went for a strategy that literally no one else has ever gone for in the history of Hearthstone. Well, that's not true, but like, for that year of trying to hard target Cthulhu Warrior with like 4 very greedy lineups. And that was a very big risk. It didn't really pan out, but I like players who take those large risks. And Frozen is definitely one of them.
Yeah, definitely. He's not scared to take risks, and bringing wacky lineups and stuff like that might actually lend itself very well in a format like this when you're down to game 5 and you need some sort of edge against your opponent. Maybe bringing something like Galakron Shaman against Mage, which we weren't too sure about how that matchup plays out. Maybe this is exactly what Team Liquid needs to kind of close out this match.
For sure. So, perspective on this matchup. I think Bogspine Knuckles is the best card in the deck in almost every single matchup. And I would not be surprised to see Frozen keep it here. Now, where it gets pretty interesting is the totem shaman kind of cards. Totemic Reflection, it feels more like filler in this deck than it does the powerhouse in normal totem shaman. A lot of matchups you can't really rely on sticking a turn 2 totem, so it seems like this matchup is probably the same based on Frozen's mulligan. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me. You know, keeping a pretty lackluster card is not really how you win games.
Yeah, I agree. It is a slower matchup where Totemic Reflection could come down pretty safely as long as not a Searing Totem is rolled on turn 2. But I think, like you said, Frozen is looking for a bit more of an explosive start. Something like exactly maybe Coin Desert Hare into Bogstruck Clacker could give him a very aggressive opening that can take advantage of perhaps Swid's limited arsenal for dealing with early minions.
I really like that suggestion of Coin Desert Hare. It really only loses to Zephrys Whirlwind. And even then, if you manage to get out of Zephrys that early, it seems like you're probably ahead.
Zephrys isn't even good whenever it pops out. So if you can use it to maybe just, if you can force your opponent to use it this early, perhaps it's unfortunate, but it would still be better than your final board being removed by Zephrys perhaps 6 or 7 turns later.
For sure. This is also a little bit of a hedge against Zephrys by using Mutate early. I'm not really sure how I feel about that. Maybe saving the Mutate for a later turn to like try to like guarantee that you land, like you can turn a bad minion into a potential good one. But okay, yeah.
Frozen also nods his head and says, "Yep, that's exactly what I was looking for." 8/8 on turn 3. Normally this card costs 4 mana.
That's cool.
That's exactly what Frozen's looking for. An explosive start to take advantage of the fact that Mage, outside of an early Doomsayer, preemptively cannot really do much about this. Even the Zephrys at this point, if it were drawn, would not be able to fully deal with the board.
There's really not much. Okay, so how does Swids combat this, right? I'm looking at Bone Wraith this turn. Seems like pretty unimpactful, right?
It stops a lot of damage, but it still lets a lot of damage through. I'm not sure if Bone Wraith will be impactful enough. I think perhaps it's an Arcane Intellect to try to... I think Zephrys is really one of the only ways you can get there, or perhaps a Doomsayer Nova if you can find that as well.
Yep, the AI definitely lends credence to trying to go for a Nova Doom, and that is probably one of, if not the only way that Frozen gets back in this game. Now, that being said, I'm not even sure if it is going to...
Be enough?
Yeah, I'm not even sure if it's going to be enough. Like,
I'm not
Frozen
sure it will
can
be.
just play Blocks by Knuckles, go face with it, and then... Oh, there's the Nova Doom, so we're going to see what happens.
This is, I think, literally the only thing that could have stopped Swids from just dying this turn. Frozen is one board space short of being able to clear this. The Mogu Flesh Shaper together with the Invocation of Frost would deal 7 damage if there were 3 board slots. Oh, actually, no, hold on. Hey, never mind. I thought that was Devoted Maniac. Different card. My bad.
I believe that you're right that if he had 1 more board space, he could have cleared everything.
Oh, no, yeah, with the Devoted Maniac in hand. Yeah, with the Devoted Maniac.
Right.
So that would have been 2 damage, 2 plus the Invoke, which is another 2, and then the Flesh Shaper would have been 7.
Right.
But limited by board space, his only play is to try to go for the Box by Knuckles and either evolve into a charge or try to set up 2-turn lethal with the 4 damage next turn as well.
This is getting pretty tense. He just needs to connect 1 swing face. So, is there any merit to like trying to swing this turn on the minion and like hope your minions get there the following turn? You Invocation of Frost the 3/2. You trade a 2/1 over the 2/5, maybe another 2/1 over the you can't even really do that, right?
Yeah, because the evolve would happen before the second half of the Bone Wraith would be killed.
Oh, so he's just going for this now.
Interesting. Oh, I like this. This sets up for Mogu Flesh Shaper next turn to just bump the rest of the taunt, and that way the Box by Knuckles can connect face if another taunt does not come down from Swids.
Sure. Swids does have a really good answer. Where did this game come from? I felt like
Frost Nova Doomsayer.
Yeah, that's definitely the answer. It just, you know what I mean, right? Like this game.
No, I know.
Over.
It did. It
like
Swids found the way to turn around. Frozen's not out of it just yet, though. Just a little bit of damage needs to get through for Frozen to actually be able to close out this game and the series. He has to consider what he could possibly hit if he wants to throw in a Hero Power as well to get an extra 2-drop, or if he'd prefer to get a totem after. I think he'd rather go for a 2-drop here. Maybe find something like a Bluegill Warrior to help get rid of the Divine Shield.
He decides to go for this over the Mana Tide, hoping to get a random 4-drop. I think that makes some sense. Saving the Mana Tide, hoping to get, Galakrond activators seems like a real way to win. I think at this point, Frozen's game plan is diverging away from just the pure aggro strategy into one of trying to get a quad invoke Galakrond and then swing with 5 from the weapon.
Makes sense. With only 2 cards left in hand for Frozen, there's not much refill, but he does have the option to search for some other cards with Farsight. Mana Tide being a bit slower, but can potentially get him some more resources that he desperately needs to be able to fight for the board. Swids here has an interesting option. He can just guarantee clear the board with Ring of the Relicologist, or he can consider going for a riskier line with something like Tortolan Pilgrim, or even Malagos trying to get either Frost Nova or a Frostbolt.
I like your suggestion of clearing the board, but I'm not really sure if this is how I would have done it.
Would you have preserved more health on the taunt, if possible?
There was a way to preserve 2 extra health on the 6/2, but you had to trade off your Astromance or Solarian.
By trading the CMAT into the Envoy of Lazul, the 2/2, and then the Solarian into one of the other minions?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we're looking at... Does it need 1 or 2 more invokes? We've seen a Devoted Maniac, an Invocation of Frost this game. I think it's only been 2.
So 2 invokes need to happen. Something like a Corrupt Elementalist, or 2 separate individual invokes need to be drawn before Frozen. If he wants to get the fully upgraded Galakrond online with the weapon, which I think is something he might be leaning towards.
I definitely like the game plan of trying to quad invoke the Galakrond. Farsight now hitting Corrupt Elementalist easily wins this game. I imagine that if you go Farsight into a taunt, the Shield of Galakrond, and then you follow up with a Mana Tide, and the Mana Tide draws an Invocation of Frost that also wins. So in my mind,
I don't believe there's any direct damage here either in the deck for Team Liquid.
I don't believe so. I know that Barcelona has some lightning bolts in their deck. Oh, so Frozen is just going for the Galakrond now. This does set up for the weapon, the second Bogs by Knuckles, to be lethal.
Exactly. I think at 18 health, he thinks he's a little too low to be taking risks like that. And I think he thinks that this is the better chance at controlling the board a bit longer, giving himself more of a chance to find the second box by Knuckles instead of hoping that he finds 2 invokes over the course of the next turn or two.
Sure, you do end up losing games to Malagos and a Fireball if you don't find an invoke card, but it's hard to say, right? Well? You definitely you always lose to Zephyrus. I think with Zephyrus, if they just heal back up, you're pretty much out of the game always, right?
Mm-hmm.
And Deep Freeze does stop the lethal.
So does Ice Barrier.
Ice Barrier also does stop the lethal.
So this is actually a very interesting choice. Ice Barrier is much more defensive and could play around a single minion that gets mutated into a charge minion.
Sure.
But Deep Freeze develops much more into the board and actually is a bit more aggressive and does freeze the face to play around, like you said, the last copy of Box by Knuckles in Frozen's deck.
Right.
Okay. Evil Totem copied with Totemic Reflection gives Frozen the chance to get some lackeys that could potentially discover either burn through Lava Burst or Lightning Bolt if there's a spell lackey, or 2 Kobold lackeys could also get the job done. But it looks like he's valuing the draws more than the random lackeys.
You have the 1 in 49 plus the chance of an Ethereal pulling you the, like you were saying, pulling burn damage.
Yeah.
I think that Swizz is just going for the Amazing Reno here. Makes a lot of sense. Get some more armor. Get rid of the drawing minions.
Yep.
Oh wow, that is a huge draw.
Definitely. Frozen still needs to be able to generate some more value in hand. He doesn't have quite enough to just outvalue Swidz, which is kind of difficult to do when Swidz has much more high-value cards in general. But the option to copy this Evil Totem will give Frozen the chance to discover some more stuff with lackeys if he gets some of the discover lackeys. Either the spell or Draconic could help him quite a bit here.
And this is an interesting deviation as well, going for the Titanic lackey. And I think it makes a lot of sense considering that you get double the buff. He could have just decided to go for Shields Galacon there, but I think this is a lot smarter.
I do like this more. I think it generates a little less in terms of raw power and damage, but it makes the totems a lot more durable and gives him a higher chance of having them survive over 2 turns and generating even more value and ways to kind of close out this game.
For sure. Swidz is slowly assembling lethal damage. He has Fireball in hand. He just needs 8 more to connect.
Now, Frozen knows that this is a secret discovered from Tortolan Pilgrim, so he knows that it will be either Flame Mortar Barrier, those being the only 2...
Sorry for interrupting you.
No, definitely. That was worth interrupting for.
That means that Lightning Bolt is lethal, Lava Burst is lethal. Am I forgetting any other ones?
Wait, is Lightning Bolt lethal?
These are both lethal.
Lava Burst is
lethal. Lava Burst is lethal.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Now, this is guaranteed because none of the secrets in Swid's decks can deal with with spells. They only deal with minions attacking face. So Frozen with the Ethereal Lackey and the Kronks finds the last remaining damage, able to finish off Swid's mage and get Team Liquid the match, and giving them the chance to stay in the tournament, perhaps try to fight their way through this lower bracket to get to the semifinals.
What happened this game, Hacker?
This game was all over the place.
Okay,
Alan.
So what's the word for it? You know how they have a not a bar, but like a line graph in certain other MOBA games where it's like this person is 99% to win, and then it's 1% to win.
Sure.
The graph for this match was all it was
all over the place. It seemed like Frozen could not lose this with the start he had, evolving into such large minions early. Right. But then Swidz was able to find the only way to be able to deal with that, and Frozen wasn't able to deal with the Doomsayer. The board was completely reset. Then Swidz ended up being on top, having a large board that Frozen couldn't deal with, but eventually Frozen was able to give up on the burn game plan with the Box by Knuckles and set up for a bigger board. And oh my god, he set himself up perfectly. I think he gave himself... We completely forgot about Kronks when we were talking about possible cards he could draw at that
Yeah.
point that could give him lethal. It wasn't just Boxbind Knuckles. Kronks was also one of the outs there, which I think Frozen was probably trying to get set up there.
Yes. That well, he needed to get the Galakron and the Kronks as well to make it like fully set up. But once that happened, it was like the 5 damage burst. But I'm pretty sure you could have shown me 3 different board states from that single match from either side, and there probably been like I would have given you a different answer on who was 100% to win every single time you showed me a different one. So that was that. I don't even know how to describe
Wacky.
that. Yeah, exactly. It felt like we played a best of 5 in one game. You know what I mean? Like Frozen won the first game, but then he lost the middle portion, but then he won the final game with the Kronk's Lava Burst, if you know what I mean. So that's a really interesting way to top things off. Unfortunately for Barcelona, for Swids, Xplies, and Zim, their tournament run is over, at least for Constructed. Maybe they can turn things around like they've been doing in Battlegrounds, but for now, it looks like Team Liquid will advance to the decider match to figure out who's going to be playing on Friday, Saturday, and hopefully in the finals on Sunday. So any last thoughts about this? I would say kind of the slog of a series.
It was I mean, generally we don't see we haven't seen that many game fives. We've actually been seeing a lot of sweeps, honestly, from some of the Chinese teams, namely IG earlier on today and on Monday. But when you have a match like this that goes the full distance, you see all 5 games, you see all 3 players on each team able to kind of show what they've got. We've seen a lot of Hearthstone in this match, and I feel like it's showcased a lot of incredible skills playing to outs, in some cases playing a little too greedy, in some cases taking risks. I think this has been like an absolute incredible game of a match of Hearthstone to watch. I think like we've seen a lot in this.
Yeah. And I know this happened what feels like a long time ago, but I just want to highlight that I think the most impressive game was probably Xplies versus Deaddraw. I think that Xplies' approach to that matchup was really smart. And, I actually felt like I learned a lot about that. Like if you had shown me that match before my first time ever playing Control Demon Hunter versus Priest, I'd feel like much more confident about my chances to win from the Priest side. So I think if you're going back through the series, check out Xplies versus Deaddraw. But yeah, like you're saying, this entire match was great.
Yeah, it was definitely happy we got to cast this together, and I enjoyed casting with you today, Galen.
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break before we go to the decider match between Team Liquid and Team RNG. So don't go anywhere. We'll be back soon.